Okay, good evening, everybody. This is a meeting of the Sunderland Community Preservation Committee, and our purpose tonight is to have a public forum that is primarily designed to get more and more input in the process of making decisions on using CPA funds this year. So the public forum will be telecasted, which it is now, and we'll be interested in widespread interest in our projects and ideas of how they look to you and looking for suggestions. So the format, as required to some degree by being a CPA town, is that we hold a public forum once a year to review our plan and review our projects for the year. So this is our meeting that requirement. And what we'll do in the next few minutes is have a little bit of talk on an overview of what's happening with CPA, including the finances. And then we will review the 6 projects that have been submitted, have applied for CPA funding. What I suggest we do is go through them one by having a presentation, fielding any questions from people that are not on the committee, but we would call the public input, and then also have some questions and comments from the CPC. So the order of events will be project by project, a little bit of an overview of what it's all about, presented by a representative of the group, questions from anywhere, and then questions and dialogue by the committee. And we'll try to stay in about the 15-minute sense of talking, and then we can go back and have another round and talk beyond that. So if that's okay with everybody, we'll do that. All right, and why don't we introduce our committee, our Community Preservation Committee in town before we start going through the presentations. So enter, if somebody's in the back there. Okay, in the meantime, let me start on my right in terms of members.
Clark, representing the Historical Commission.
Jennifer Uncles, representing the Conservation Commission.
Richard Lopatka, representing the Housing Committee.
Sarah Snyder, representing the Planning Board.
Mike Wissman, representing y'all at large.
And I'm Shauna Dean, representing the Recreation Committee.
Tom Fedenkevich, whatever Mike doesn't represent.
Right. Thanks. So this is our 3rd year in operation, and we're still glued together, and we still talk to each other, so I think it's going pretty well. So we have a full committee here today to look at these materials to be brought in front of us. Before we start the project-by-project playdown, I would like to give a little bit of an overview of what's happening with CPA. And fortunate for you, I do not have a power plant presentation. A PowerPoint. I have a power plant presentation. It's all going to blow up on me. But we have no PowerPoints this year, and just a reference to where the material is. So there's a handout floating around the room, and it's available. It has 2 sides to it. The first side, the text side, is basically the annual report that will be put in the town annual report. It's our letter. And if you're interested in how this whole process works, you can look at the letter, and you can also go to the website, and there's plenty of information about us there. So in terms of how we're operating, we've been doing consistently the same approach for 3 years now, starting to get the bugs out of it. And basically, it is a 2-step process. We entertain early conversation about these projects and then call for a deadline for the full proposals. So we've done that now a couple of years, and we've done it this year, okay? So that's how it works. You can participate as much as you would like. I would suggest to you that this year we've had a lot of participation. There's a lot of little fingerprints on these projects, and I think that's a good sign, okay? So that's the process. The other side of the sheet you have, and if it's somewhat readable up on the screen there, is a summary of the finances. And it's going to be and in your books from the CPC, in the first page there's the finances. It's going to be important that you know them, you understand what they're all about before you listen to projects and start making some decisive decisions here. So it's not that complicated. If you look at the sheet with the numbers, we report out at the end of a fiscal year, June 30th, where the books are for CPA, just like a lot of reporting is done for the full town counting. And so we ended last June, at $209,719 in dollars in the accounts. So that's the full account value. $60,000 of that, roughly, was committed. It's with projects unfinished, it's for set-asides and whatever we had to do in terms of setting up accounts. So that's off the table. That leaves undesignated funds at the end of last year of $149,074. So that's available monies for us as we talk about these projects. Since June 30th, we received our 100% match for our surcharge, and that came in October, and that brings another $92,977 to the books. That's an exact number. That's kind of what was calculated out, and that's what we got. As we speak, we're still collecting taxes for this fiscal year. There may be someone coming down with a wallet downstairs right now. Ka-chunk, ka-chunk. So as the taxes get collected at the end of June coming, we would expect to have collected another $93,000. That's a fairly accurate number, by the way, because we know what the bills are we sent out. The only variations can be someone didn't pay, and then we got to sort of get them, try to track it down. But both those numbers, those add-ins to the 149, are pretty good numbers to base our planning on. So we have basically three little buckets of money here that could be used for these projects: the 149, the 92,997, and the 93,000. Now, if you look at the 6 projects we'll be discussing in the next few minutes, you would notice the total on the bottom is $156,696, $156,000 worth of projects. Suppose we did every one of those to the dollars prescribed here. That would leave us roughly $178,000 for going on to the following year. Now, we get some interest. We have some small bills. So it's an estimate, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not going to be that far away. So as you think about projects and whether we should have more money going to some or less, keep in mind that we're keeping note of how it's rolling. And so 156 still would leave us a running start for the following year. We're not going to sort of go blank, bust because we have no money. So that's the sense of it. My personal view is that we ought to do a good job with these projects. We ought to do it the quality way, the best way we can, because as CPA people, we're doing things that hopefully will be around 50, 75, 100 years. So let's not put up stuff that, we wish we hadn't. So I think the guiding principle here is do it well, okay? That's it. So that opening chart is basically the background of what we're going to try to decide upon in the next few hours and few days in that respect. So, any thought, any questions on that? Does that make sense? See where we're coming from? Okay, so let's begin. Now, how do you know which one to go first? Well, the list is made in terms of the order in which things came in this year, the paperwork came in. And so the first one that came in, actually it came in before Christmas, it was the first one, the tennis court rehabilitation project, and then the others followed in somewhat the order. So why don't we start there? Why don't we just go, and fairness will come through the process as it's been presented. Okay. We also would like, if we could, have presenters of these projects be here tonight and actually make the presentation. We have 2 projects that won't be represented by the submitter. The first one, and the one having to do with the historic records. Marty is not able to be here tonight. Marty Barrett, she has an important meeting in Deerfield on the elementary school budget. I also screwed up and didn't get her the date right, so she didn't have time to make rearrangements. But she has full support of what we're trying to do here. Her not being here has got nothing to do with whether she thinks it's important or not, just the way it came out. She offered that she would entertain any questions by email we may have as soon as tomorrow morning, if we had any. So we're going to go along with that. So.
Answer questions if you have general sort of questions about that.
Okay, thank you. We'll do that, all right? So short of not having Marty here, what I'd like to do is get this this project on the table and at least have people understand what it is, and then we go from there. In our book, each of us on the committee has this blue book of all the projects. The format we've used for a few years now has asked for some detail. And what I'd like to do is go through the application submitted, give you a high picture of what was submitted and what she said, and then we'll start getting some questions and see how it goes. I'm not sure exactly how this will work, so I'll make a suggestion. Why don't I summarize a page the way I think it's a reasonable summary, and then if anybody would like to add from the committee that's following this along in the application, add something I didn't say or interpretation, but we just have that added in, okay? So let's start page by page. The first page says this is a project is the rehabilitation of the Frontier Regional School tennis courts. Rehabilitation, you know, it's 7, what? Rehabilitation.
Doozy.
It's a doozy. It means to restore. It's restoring the tennis courts. And it's all a recreational project in the category. And the funding asked for from Sunderland is $8,451, shown on the chart up there. The total price of the project is $33,000. So it is presented by and will be run by the regional school district, with Marty responsible and her support man at the school. There's a guy named, you guys know him more than me, right? It's Bob Lesko. So that's kind of where the management of this project would come from. So that's the cover page. Capiche, okay? Next page asks to describe the project, what the goals are, what the benefits are. So it's proposed that these funds are needed to rehabilitate the tennis courts. They're housed at Frontier. There are 4 courts there. They're open to the public, and they're used by at least one town for recreation, run by the rec department of Deerfield. Right now, improvements are needed to allow for safe playing. And we're told that 1 or 2 more years and it either gets fixed or it's going to be shut down. Okay? What are the goals? The goal is to provide recreational opportunity for students and adults at the school. She says that's one of the few public tennis courts in the area. We do not have a public tennis court in Sunderland. I don't think we have any plans to at this point in time. So it's access to a public court, free. And it allows the participation in tennis that really is not a high-price sport. So it's a way of getting exercise and stay up on yourself in a sport that most people can afford. She also says that it's good for all ages. It's young and families and even old people can play tennis. So it covers a wide range of. Yeah, oh, she says, that sounds so much classier. You can play tennis in your golden years. Thank you very much. That was that page. Any other clarifications? Next page, how will the success be measured? She says it will be measured by the amount of participation. That's all she says at this point. It will be measured by the amount of participation. How does this project fulfill the CPC vision? Some of you know that as a committee, we've provided guidelines for what we're looking for. One of them was looking for cost share, and she says this project will be shared by 4 towns, investing by 4 towns, and it will also reduce the operating budget at Frontier, and the cost of the support will not come from their capital budget or from their operating budget. It would come from the CPC. So it's a slight savings in the operating budget, then a slight savings in our assessment levels in terms of total dollars we pay. So there's no extra cost coming in. It's like costs that are going to save us on the other side. What is the nature and level of support? Well, basically, again, she's saying that the support is measured by the participation of the 4 towns. And I think the expectation is this project is a go if the 4 towns say yes. Okay? All right. Any other thought? Everybody okay on that page? All right. The next page, she shows the dollars, how they're distributed over the 4 towns. So our town will pay 8,451, Whately 4,748, Conway 4,455, and the town of Deerfield 15,345. The numbers are calculated on the same ratios that's used for that rolling population number, you know, that determines our assessment numbers. So there's no new invention here of fair share. It's basically picking up on the ratios that we use for other things, okay? The outline says, have you made any other attempts to do this? She answers, I have applied only to Deerfield CPA in previous years, and they felt it should be a cost share of 4 towns, and they shouldn't pay by themselves. Okay? Moving on, not too much on the next page. Then she signs it. End of the question by question. We have been provided a map. I understand there's 4 courts involved, so the numbers move up because there's 4 courts. If I remember right, we're talking about these courts being built in the 90s? Tom, would you?
It was
Mid-nineties?
when the Frontier was rehabilitated, so they just paid off the mortgage, so I would say 24 years ago, 23 years
Yeah,
ago.
so they've been around. I'm told that to build brand-new 4 courts of this quality is probably $500,000. So that's probably not a doable thing. So the question comes back to how do you keep them the way you can keep them, or the way you need to keep them, right? Marty went off and got a proposal. She has a proposal attached from Vermont Tennis Course Surfacing. The proposal is basically what her numbers represent here, $31,918 for basically a redo, which is not a resurface, but a fixing cracks and solidifying a few other things on the court. So that's the basis of the numbers that we're talking about, is this proposal. There's one little hitch to it, and I've talked to her, we've talked a couple of times about this. This proposal for the repair is warranted for only 2 years. So that's, it's hard. So we talked about, could you do better than that? CPA is looking for longer-term care and support to some degree. So she went out and tried to find some other proposals. As some of you know, this is not even easy to get a proposal for some of this kind of work. So you find one person and you're happy you got it to some degree. But she did find that if we look for like a 2-year, no, a 10-year, not a 2, but a 10-year guarantee, she got a proposal. It was about $120,000. $120,000. That's taking out all the base and starting over again. Apparently, there had been some flaws with the base from day one, actually. If you do the numbers and you want to have the best value for 10 years, guess what? You're better off doing the lower number 3 times, and you'll save money, basically. So whether you're looking for a short-term fix or a long-term fix, it seems that it's hard to do much more than try to do the best you can. We can't afford a new tennis court, and even affording a whole redo of the base for tennis is a hard sell, right? So she's decided to stay with the proposal being the short-term one, repeated over and over again. That's the idea. So that's the proposal. The proposal shows where the money will come from. It's based on a reasonable effort at cost and proposal. Has cost share and claims it will help Sunderland by providing our residents the money. I mean, the opportunity to play, yes.
Richard, can you speak of the fact that the project will be in Deerfield?
Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Yes, I checked out the eligibility issues having to do with a project out of town, and actually, a CPA encourages that. There is a location restriction. It's that it has to be in Massachusetts.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So if we want to sponsor something in Boston Commons, go for it.
No, I think we should be hitting up Newton for money to pay for our stuff out here. That's what I think.
Yeah, but relative to the regulations of CPA, yeah, it's entirely possible to do that. They like to see the collaboration between towns and the regionalization aspects. That's a plus in the eyes of those people.
So one of the things that you had mentioned earlier was that we had received 100% for the 3 years. Would this help going down the road maybe when they consider about percentage coming back to the town? Maybe next year or the year after? If they like to have to see towns partner on different things?
I'll be honest with you, Tom, I think not. They have a set of rules for calculating your percentage return.
Okay.
It has to do with the size of the town, the wealth of the town, and we're small, so we get good points for that, and we're not particularly wealthy. So we're in the top level in terms of getting the 100%. I don't think they look at projects to make that decision.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was just gonna ask about the tennis courts. Aren't they used by the children, the high school kids during the day in
Yeah.
PE?
Yes, they are.
So,
They are.
so all the kids are benefiting from,
All the kids, and, right. And this would re-emphasize the non-school use. This would,
Yeah.
and I would say we probably even want to make some more noise about that, publicizing it and getting it known. Yes,
As a
Christine.
Sunderland resident that is there at least once a week, as many times as I can in the summer, because I love tennis, it is a great place, and there are people always there, all ages. It inspires me, because I know that, hopefully I can play on. It's, and it's people from all the towns that are there all the time, at any time of the day. I mean, it's great, and the kids are,
And they look really happy, and they're doing something healthy.
and there are kids, there are
There's
adults.
no trouble.
It's a
Yeah.
huge range, and
Yeah.
it's really great. People ride their bikes there. I mean, yeah, so really well used, I would say.
Yeah.
All the
definitely
summer.
Dick, to your point,
Really
though,
affordable, yeah.
exactly. Because, the sort of the role of the CPA and the CPC, I really think that, some of our families, we tend to be fairly resourceful, and my husband and I and the kids have used those courts so many times. But as part of the resurfacing and really the connecting of these, I think it's a great idea for all the towns to pay into getting this up to snuff. But I think that signage and communication about the use of the courts should really be turned up a notch, especially after we've all come together and funded the repairing of it. So just making sure that the signage is really toned to welcome community residents from the 4 towns, or even something that acknowledges that this is a funded investment that represents the, 4 towns putting money together to do that.
I think that's good input. I think, Sarah, you mentioned that as well one time, about getting a sign up there about what's going on and welcoming people. Tennis courts are interesting in my experience. You're not sure you're welcome or not. You notice that?
Sneak it in.
And some people have to pay to be on courts, and some private places have courts, so you see a nice court, and a lot of times you can't have access to it. So your first mental block is, oh, that's a nice court there, but I can't play on it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would suggest that the school put some kind of, not that I like rules that much, but some sort of rules like when people can use it, because if the school's gonna use it during the school day, plus there's security around the school and stuff like that these days, that you don't want people who don't belong on campus being on campus. They should have sort of like when you can use it or how you go about arranging to use it. That should be communicated to the 4 towns so that people understand what the usage really could be. So I would suggest that they do that.
Okay?
I just wanted to clear up the issue about CPA eligibility, because my understanding was that maintenance is not an eligible expense. And we talked about that before, but how is that, has that been resolved?
Yes and no. There is strong language in the new law having to do with maintenance and capital improvements. And clearly, maintenance is not allowed. So the question would be, is this maintenance or is this capital improvement? And I haven't seen that I haven't seen the court since all the snow, and so I don't have a personal sense of what it's like there today. But I'm told that it's almost unplayable.
Do you know when the last time something was done to it? 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago?
No, that's a good question to ask.
There's
Mark.
definitely some patching efforts a few years back, but it's beyond any kind of
Yeah.
patching strategy at this
And I
point.
think the last really big patches, because we played on those courts, I think the last big patches were done at least 8 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe longer.
Yeah.
So you did say, Richard, that in a few years, they're telling you that they'd be unplayable, so they would have to close.
Yes.
Well, that doesn't sound like maintenance to me. It sounds more like rehabilitation.
Yeah.
Rehabilitate.
That's
That's
seven
seven.
civil.
That's
Refurbish.
Seven syllables. Okay, well, that's a good, got some of our note takers here helping us. We got that idea? Yeah. Now, one last point on Sarah's question there. There's an illegal aspect, there is a legal aspect to this. Not an illegal aspect, but a legal aspect. If we wanted to just know for sure, we could pay to have a lawyer counsel on this. But I think the committee should think about that in going forward with this. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. So I think we'll make a judgment call on that. Anybody have any thoughts on whether it's bothering you enough to pay lawyers, or you think we should just do what we think?
No. Common sense prevails.
Common
Yeah.
sense?
Exactly.
Benefits of a small town, it's all good.
All right? Is that okay with, let's just record that as an important feedback. Okay, anything else on this one?
Did you talk to Marty about if any of the other towns do not fund their portion of the match?
Well, she has some choices. She could go pay for it out of their own plan, out of their own dollars, their own capital plan. That's her fallback, I think. And also, towns could do their part without using CPA money. There's no reason, if we decide to do it here, but Deerfield decides not to, but's gonna sponsor it and wanna pay for it under free cash or something like that, they're entitled to do that, right?
But is it basically all or none in terms of CPA funds?
I think, in terms of the town supporting it, it's all.
Well, I mean, either, I mean, if we voted to use our funding and only, one of the town votes, do our funds get used, or is it based on all 4 towns approving it?
We'll clarify that, but I think it's going on, all 4 towns have to agree. So we'll have a question to her
I also
about
don't think we'll have to wait long. I think it's going in front of all of the committees incredibly soon. So
Soon, yeah.
I think
Well-
it's sort of gonna, maybe we'll know if we're addressing that
Yeah, right.
disparity later,
Right.
soon.
Conway is tonight, by the way. Their CPA meeting is tonight. Deerfield has got one coming up, and she didn't know what Whately was doing.
I think Jennifer has a point well taken, and I think now that Justine may be able to add more, but I think they're putting together a capital plan now, right, that they have not really had in the past. And also, I think this is a long-term lack of maintenance that gets us to the position where it becomes a rehabilitation.
Right.
So I would hope that we would convey to the school committee that we would think that this would be in a normal budget and it's being renovated, or the maintenance is done every year instead of allowing it to degrade to a point where we have to do an unusual amount of
Right,
rehab.
right. I think that's an excellent point. We should insist on a proper level of maintenance going forward.
I think that's what and I think that's what they're doing now, because I think it's Scott is working.
Right, we spent an hour the other night discussing this same thing about what maintenance, and what constitutes maintenance and what is, so it's not an easy question anywhere, but yeah, they are working on it, and I think next year and the year after we'll see. But I mean, I think this part of the issue with these courts in particular was when they were initially built, it was incorrectly done.
Right.
That's why, it's not that they're not taking care of them, that's not why they're having these problems. It's because of the initial laying of that they didn't dig deep enough, basically.
And actually, Richard, that's not, if you remember back, maybe before you were on the finance committee, but Frontier did have a lawsuit against the company that put it in. Not that, but the football field and the track.
Right.
So there was a problem.
Yeah, good. I think we've got the gist of it then. Last thought, I think if a little more proactive attention to maintenance, you wouldn't have to do this every 2 years. It'll fix itself.
I think tennis courts are notoriously difficult to repair.
Yeah.
I just know that Braves has had tennis courts across the street, and they've repaired them several times, and they crack very soon. They don't last. 2 years, if you get it to last 2 years without some more cracking with a bad base, then you're doing pretty well. So we might be looking at this again sooner rather than later. So it becomes a definition of what's maintenance. If you're doing it every 2 or 3 years, that's, you know, and then what can you really do for maintenance if your
Yeah.
base is bad? So I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
Okay, any other thoughts on this one? Very nice conversation. I think it's gonna help us with the restrictions and the add-ons that we wanna see happen in terms of doing this well. Shall we move on? Okay, the second one in order, second one turned in is the Merritt Field project. And Shauna, you wanna take
Great.
us through that?
Yep, I guess I'll wear a different hat for this.
Yeah.
Actually, it's the same hat, but on a different, in a different position. So, the Merritt Field project is actually a project that I'm bringing today in front of you, along with Deb Lane, who represents the Frontier Regional School District. She also runs our out-of-school programs in the district, if you don't know her from that source. Deb and I were assigned as team project managers on this. But the project is called the Merritt Field Project after the Tim Merritt, the principal of Sunderland Elementary School, passed away much too young and too soon, leaving us this year. And this project, the Merritt Field Project, is a project to refurbish and to put in place a top-quality softball field just off the left side of Swampfield Drive as you drive on campus to Sunderland Elementary School. The need and the discussion around needing a softball field in the town of Sunderland had existed well before the idea to memorialize Mr. Merritt had come along. The town of Sunderland currently doesn't have a proper softball field. The girls do play on a baseball field with a mound. If you're a softball person, you realize that's a big no-no. Softball fields and baseball fields do have differences. The main one, for those of you who are dialing in on this, is that softball fields are an all-dirt infield and have no pitcher's mound, and a baseball field has a grass infield. Some of the measurements are different, and there is a mound, famously a mound. So there had been discussion, because we currently lean very heavily on the resources of Deerfield, who has a very nice quality field. And we've been in the region looking for a better softball field. So that conversation was afoot, and Mr. Merritt had just gotten wind of it about a year prior to his passing, and was very excited about getting behind the project and helping to get this in motion. And then Mr. Merritt passed, and Marty Barrett and different leaders from all of the towns and from the schools came together and said, why don't we move this project forward and make it a Merritt Memorial Field in honor of Mr. Merritt? So we're here tonight asking for an investment of $20,458 against a project whose total value is $47,700. This, again, is a project to build a top-quality softball field. For those of you who haven't checked out the Sugarloaf Field, just over the bridge, just past Sugarloaf on the right, we do have another fine quality field in region. We're hoping to match that and have something of similar quality. The finances for this project, I'm very proud of them, because I think they represent something that's a key feature of the project we're bringing to bear, which is the investment of the region and not just the town. And I think one of the goals of the CPA when we approach funding a project is to really see how we can leverage the energy, the human capital, the interest, and the value of a region versus just the town. And this project really, I think, defines that beautifully. I won't get into the details because it's sort of a detailed project. I mean, we could talk about fences and dirt that were getting shipped in and whatnot. But some of the details of the finances, I think, are very interesting when considering whether to move forward with the project. I want to share with you, hold on, flipping here. I'm going to go right back to the budget, if you all want to flip over to the Merritt Field budget project. I really want to call out some of the resources that we've pulled together to offset the cost of building a high-quality field. First of all, before approaching the project, we had to go through necessary approvals, and we do have the full support of all of the key stakeholders. We started our project by coming in front of the select board. They, in much a format like this, they had a lot of good questions for us, asked us to seek out the approval of the Conservation Committee. We worked with Todd Nerminger and the team on the Conservation Committee to make sure that the site was good. We currently, again, we worked with the selectmen on several questions, making sure we understood the current usage of the field. I spoke to Mr. Barshevsky and to the PE instructor at Sunderland to understand how the field would benefit the students of the school. And I also worked with the regional rec directors. Deb and I worked with all of the different groups that have access to the nearby fields to understand those issues. So if you want to dive in on that, you can read some of the letters of support we have from those folks, and you can feel free to ask me questions. But where I think I'm most proud is one of the bigger line items here is building a high-quality field. We were just talking about these tennis courts that got built and the sub-materials weren't right. One thing about this field is we're building this field to be a long-standing, top-quality field. And one of the ways we're ensuring that is that we have as a project engineering coordinator a gentleman named Brent Gewalter, who is the head of facilities and fields for Deerfield Academy. And if any of you are familiar with his work, he's considered a guru of grounds maintenance and field creation. He's been sort of the mastermind behind a lot of the nicest, beautiful fields that we've seen, and he's donated his time and efforts in Deerfield quite a bit. Our access to him came at the request of Marty Barrett, who requested to the Dean of Deerfield Academy if we could access Brent's skills, and that was approved in the donation of his labor, equipment, and efforts to engineer the field and to leverage all of his resources about how to construct and to build it perfectly is all being donated by Deerfield Academy, which is, again, a little bit farther away and really a nice investment in region. In addition to that, there's a couple line items that I'm really proud of. The Deerfield Recreation Committee has given us $2,500 toward the project as well. Also, the parents and the parent-teacher organization from Sunderland Elementary School gifted $2,000 to this project. And we're currently pursuing some private donations for some of the costs that can't fall under the CPA. For example, we're going to need a mower on site, and we've got some really good options out there for that as well. But if you look through, some of the most exciting stuff is the most boring stuff. We have donations of labor from, actually, Deb, why don't you share a little bit? You did a lot of the securing of the construction folks. Why don't you share with us?
So, again, this comes back to Tim Merritt. When we discussed this project with all of the people, and we said we wanted to make this in memory of Tim Merritt, they all stepped forward. We've got Lane Construction Company who's going to come in and donate the cement and anything else we need, whether it's gravel or whatever, to do the dugouts. We've got Franklin County Tech School. They don't build the dugouts like we want. We want the brick, the cement.
Mason and stone, right?
Yeah. So they're going to do the roofs, though. They're going to come in and build the roofs for it. They've already offered to do that. We've got Steve Morris, who's coming in, and he's going to do the whole field. He's going to landscape it and remove a lot of soil from in there, and so that we have a really good field once we bring the dirt back in. We've got Frontier, Bill Benoit, who is building our scoreboard and also the sign for the field. This is all donated. So when you're looking at it, these people all came together for one person, and they want to do what's best for the kids in the community. And so they're willing to give, and they just keep saying, whatever you need, just come forward, We've got, again, Frontier behind us saying, well, you know what, we've got that big ugly box out front, the electrical box, let's see what we can do to remove that and put in a smaller box so there's still be power out there. So we have the support of the school again. I mean, it's not money-wise, it's time and energy, and that's what every single one of the people that we talk to were willing to do. The same with DA. The minute they heard what we were doing and why we were doing it, they stepped forward and they said, tell us what you need. We've got parents who are willing to come and build it. So we just need your support and this funding to do this. But it's going to be a great place for kids, for community members, for families.
And Deb, to build on that, I think, so just to clarify the finances, so we had to calculate a cost for the donated time and materials. In total, that came to $17,000. The ask for the CPA is really to cover mostly the construction of the dugouts, the fencing. The shed, a 10 by 12 shed, will have a full, a nice quality, very large shed on site that will house all the materials we need for maintenance. We have talked down the road, it'd be really fun if we had an option to have a snack bar on site for events at that thing. So we're really having a long view to how we can continue to use the resource that the elementary school provides for families and the community to leverage it. So the finances here are good. We've got about half the cost of the project donated in labor and cost materials, and we're asking for $20,458 from the CPA. I also want to point out the vision for usage. I think it's important that this project and the money that would be awarded would be going to the Sunderland Recreation Committee. It would be the Sunderland Rec Committee's job to oversee the paying out of the CPA funds to pay for the different materials. It's also the CPA's job to handle the maintenance of this field. And I can tell you that this is a place where I personally am sort of putting myself out there with the Sunderland Rec Committee. We've already started conversations with the rec directors and folks from the other towns, and we're looking to create a regional maintenance strategy for fields that really alleviates the burden of any one town and create some consistency in the quality and the way we maintain the fields. Sort of a vision that would sort of click with all of us would be, so picture the Whately softball field, the Deerfield softball field and the Sunderland softball field are all very close together, right? Because they're getting used all at one time. So if we secured somebody with a trailer whose job it was, especially during the growing season, to pool resources for buying equipment, like for having equipment and going around and doing them twice a week the way they should properly be done. So there's a great conversation going on right now with a lot of interest to really build something for the long view in terms of maintaining our fields. And this is an ongoing challenge in Sunderland for all of our fields, and something that the rec committee is very interested in. And just finally, I just want to mention that the softball field, the use of the softball field, of course, during the school day and during the week is Mr. Barshevsky and his staff usually oversee the usage of the fields. A request comes into him when the soccer fields are going to be used and the management of that. The goal and the view of success for this field is how much it gets used. The goal would be to have it used during the school day by the PE program for dodgeball and wiffle ball and different PE programs that service all 217 students at the elementary school. Outside of school hours, it will heavily be used by the four-town Sunderland, the rec softball league, which services, I think, 146 girls right now, ages from 2nd grade up through 6th grade. Additionally, we would like to invite adult softball leagues to use this as a resource as well. And I also, everyone, because of the energy and the excitement around the building of this field, there's been an incredible amount of buzz and talk about creating an adult softball team that practices right on that field with members of the teaching staff at Sunderland Elementary and the community. So I think that Deb tapped into something that really matters with this project, is that there's a point in time right now where people are really willing to give extra because of, in the memory of Mr. Merritt, to get something built that we all really need. It's actually been my pleasure to work on the project because of that. It's been so easy to talk to people about donating because they've been so receptive. So be happy to answer any of your specific questions about the project.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the floor? Any thoughts, comments? If not, questions from the table here? Clarifications?
I have a question. When I was reading through this, the question number 5, how does the project fulfill the CPC vision for projects and specific goals as outlined in the guidelines for proposals? I didn't feel like the answer matched the question, and I'm just wondering how the, if you all can answer that, how it meets the.
So Dick, can you pull up, can you actually, the vision and project, so a few of the things we addressed here was safety is always a primary issue, and one of the things that we noted, and one of the reasons we acknowledge it, is that because it's off of a main road and the parking exists in such a flow that it's safe, it's like a good destination field where there's not a lot of kids crossing traffic and all around town. Once you're on campus at Sunderland, it's a fairly insulated environment. And there's, lighting available, and safe parking. So
It's probably one of the best fields for handicap.
Yeah.
Because
you can drive right
the
up to it.
parking lot is so close to the field, very easy access for everyone.
one of the requirements is that the resources be spent to serve diverse populations. And that would, of course, one of the questions, certainly this is going to benefit the girls softball league immensely, but that's one of the reasons we wanted to make sure that the school leveraged it as a resource so that the taxpayers are seeing benefit for all the students there. It also is an easy field to access for viewing too, like the walking path to the back of the school. You can walk to that field pretty easily. And I think it gives sort of a certain buzz and energy. It's another one of those things where if you're in the community and you see kids playing ball, it's an easy one to walk to and sit and enjoy. It's a great place to watch a game. And the parking can be a little chaotic back here, and I think the parking is much easier at Sunderland Elementary School. So I feel good about that. So some of it was safety, handicap accessibility. While we're not building any particular ramps, I will say that the access there is as good as it could get, to get someone rolling onto that little sidewalk there right near the field. And then I think just beauty mattered. I mean, part of it was I can't think of a more inspiring place to step up to bat with the mountain behind you and that. So, but what I had read were asking about those kinds of things. If there was a similar.
I can add to this too. There's two things that happened since we wrote our vision. The vision was written the first year, and the person Gianna, that took the lead in the recreation was very much interested in the non-sports aspects of recreation, and the law didn't really apply or allow for recreation projects as it does now, which includes competitive sports. So I think our vision that we started with needs to be updated a little bit to reflect the laws opening up a little bit in terms of what we can do, and maybe a little turn in Sunderland as well, that sports is okay to have into CPA.
May I read the guidelines
Sure.
for recreational
Sure.
projects? Just so we're,
Please.
okay. The overall goal is to provide recreational opportunities that benefit all ages and abilities, promote a sense of well-being and connection to fellow community members, and improve the overall quality of life in Sunderland. And the specific points below that are create accessible community gathering places, provide recreational opportunities for all ages and abilities, and enable appreciation of and a connection to Sunderland's natural resources.
Yeah,
Well, if I could, Sarah,
those
Yeah.
were actually the three bullets we did.
I know personally, sometimes when you get on, I belonged to a softball team for 25 years in Amherst, and was it last year, the year before, the league no longer exists because there wasn't an interest. Our team has gotten still together at the ball field over here to play, which isn't as convenient when you got a fence 180 feet, because some people can hit it over like Mike, left-handed, over the fence. So if you did have, it would be kind of nice because, and then afterwards, we went to, we'd go over to our house and, we had a bar. So I think it probably fits that. And I would follow up with Linda's suggestion earlier about signage at the tennis courts. There should be signage at the softball field at the same, welcoming people to utilize it and tell them what hours that is available, and or if we want to try to do some type of scheduling, who you could talk to schedule the field from. But I think sometimes we have a lot of facilities, but we sometimes don't promote that we want people to use them.
Actually, I can take that advisement as the chair of the rec committee as something that, I'll clearly be motivated to meet that need, but I think that's a point well taken, and we will. And I did try to have the points follow those. I know it was sort of vague, the natural resource. I was like, I know we're talking about, we are talking about a softball field. I don't think we should shy away from that. We are building a beautiful, gorgeous dugouts, a stunning softball field. But I think one of the things that I wrote here, and I did not mean it in a cheesy way, I think driving on campus at Sunderland Elementary School and seeing that sign, that wooden sign that says, "Welcome to Merritt Field, home of the Sunderland Eagles." Mr. B, I'll let you talk about our new mascot strategy. But, and having this really beautiful quality field that sparkles. You know how when something looks new and shining? I think as a child, that makes you feel invested in. And I think as a community, that makes you feel proud. And I think that certainly the mourning and the sadness associated with the loss of Mr. Merritt has reached well beyond the school committee. And we all know that he was someone very engaged with the veterans community and with everybody in this town. And I think that having something that beautiful that we can all see on a regular basis serves a value to us in comforting us in the loss of Mr. Merritt.
I think the fact that it's a dirt infield also makes it more accessible for wheelchair-bound students and/or community members, you know, as opposed to a grass infield. So it really would include many more people.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Let's go to project 3 on the list, and we'll see what we have to do here. So we have
You guys, we're
Good.
project
Trey.
3.
Tracy and Carlos.
Tracy and Carlos and Mr. Barshevsky and
Barshevsky.
Justine are all here, and Cecile Antes is another member of our committee. It's
Okay.
for the Sunderland Playground Committee. And we have a project, and I just need to replace some pages for you. I met with Richard in between me submitting the application, and I just kind of cleaned up this question 2 so that it really matched our drawings. And, you know, I was kind of hopeful on some things, and instead of being hopeful, I should have been clear. And then also with this replacement page are a couple of letters that have come in since.
Good.
Thank you.
And Shauna, I know how to get you a whole copy
I think
of
we're
all of
good.
this, so
Tom
when
and
you
I, we're
share,
so on it.
and
Got our own
I-
table, we're
and
good.
I just didn't know how many there
No
would
biggie.
be.
Great.
And so our, Charlie, should I start with like our little spiel?
Start with the spiel.
Got a spiel?
So we have submitted an application for a lot of money, but it includes a lot of things. And the primary reason for us submitting an application to CPA was to update our playground and make it more safe and remodeled, as well as adding some nature trails and bringing in the sort of natural aspects of that setting and all of the attributes that are right there that we don't have to bring in, like the birds and the swamp life and, you know, the picnicking areas and all that sort of thing that are already there for us, but just need to kind of be merged with the playground itself. And the way to do that is by merging the youth with the adults that are there. And the adults would be grandparents, parents, during off-school hours, and during school hours, it would be teachers and caregivers, and also during the off-school hours, it's obviously the larger community that uses that walking loop. So that's kind of the short story.
Yep.
And Carlos is gonna.
Yeah, and
Give
I
us
just
the
wanted to
details.
emphasize, I mean, kind of the way that we came up with this idea. First of all, we had some issues with the playground, and I think that was pretty evident. We have issues of safety with safety surfacing, and some or most of the play equipment right now is off code. So we have some safety issues that we have with the playground. We also had some accessibility issues that we have with playground. Having a pea gravel surface is not the best accessible surface, and actually it used to be accepted, and nowadays it isn't accepted as a playground surface. But at the same time, we didn't want to just look at the playground. We wanted to see what the opportunities of the whole campus kind of provided to the town, to Sunderland, and how this was the only playground in town, the only public playground in town, the only public playground in if you think about it, we do have the baseball fields and everything else there, but there isn't anything for kids between the ages of, I would say, 5 and 12 years old for active, if it's not within a sport. So the playground kind of provides you that on restricted or on non-play type of exercise that you can do. And then the other things that I looked at when we started looking at this, just looking at the bigger picture, looking at a master plan and giving kind of a guideline for the future of the playground and all these recreational facilities kind of around the, and thinking that it is very important to just have a master plan or some plan that gets us going in the right direction. And we're seeing this as being a project that would happen in many phases, probably 4 or 5 phases. But the main items that we were, Tracy touched on was a kind of formalizing the walking loop that exists right now. I mean, people use it constantly, use it for walking dogs, use it for walking for exercise, and kind of by creating another loop that comes around with a nature trail, I think that would provide almost double the amount of what we have right now if it's a walking trail. We'll also provide opportunities for nature watching around the wetlands. Also educational opportunities around the wetlands for the students in the school. Improving the playground, of course, which is what we're going to be talking right after this, and also providing some exercise facilities for adults in this walking, so what we call outdoor exercise equipment close to the playground, so that parents, at the same time that they bring their kids, or grandparents bring their kids to the playground, they can actually enjoy doing some exercise outdoors and some of this type of equipment. And one last item that we had looked at was integrating some of the existing drainage structure, basically the big swale that's behind the building, and actually planting that up and creating a rain garden that could be an educational rain garden. So we're looking at this big picture of all these things that could happen, and many, and at least having a guideline of where we should start. So the next part of this that we're seeing is that the first thing that we would do would be working on the playground itself. And the phase 1, which is what we're coming in for these funds, would include the resurfacing of the playground, removing the non-code playground equipment, relocating some of the playground equipment more conveniently for accessibility. Right now, the existing the bigger playground play feature is right on the back. Well, we're planning on actually pushing that forward and being closer to the main walkway that comes from the school, and where the special education classrooms are going to be. So it's going to be a much more accessible playground. The other big thing that it's not cool, or it doesn't sell playgrounds, but it's drainage. One of the main issues we've had here is that, of course, this was built on a swamp. The water table is extremely high, meaning it's less than 6 inches. So that's created a huge problem with the existing safety surface that we have. It's basically made it into a big concrete floor, which has no resilience, no way for somebody who would fall here to actually just be safe. So one of the aspects that we would be looking at for phase 1 would be to actually elevating the whole playground a certain amount, so that we can stay away a little bit from that groundwater. There is existing drainage that I don't think it's working right now from the investigations we did in the last couple of years. So we'll be making that drainage system actually work. So when groundwater comes up, we can actually drain the playground and not destroy or make or damage the safety surface that we're going to be investing on. Right now it is pea gravel that's really tight because all this dust has been accumulating on it from the groundwater. We are proposing that that would be a wood chip type of surface, which is the least expensive of all the safety surfaces that are approved for accessibility and also for safety for drops. So that's basically what we will be doing for that first part, and then adding one structure, which will be a net structure, so that the kids, even though we're doing all this work that they're not going to appreciate, because safety surface and drainage is not the things that my 11-year-old really appreciate, but actually being able to actually add at least 1 or 2, depending on how the funding comes around, but adding 2 of these structures, one of them being a net structure, and probably having also a spinner structure added to the playground. And I can give you a breakdown of costs. One of the things that is surprising to people, I'm a landscape architect. I've been working for the last 7 years in Northampton for the virtual design group. I've built probably at least 6 playgrounds or 5 playgrounds that I've designed and gone through the process of building. And the first thing that hits everybody in the head is the cost of this stuff, and it's extremely expensive. And the way I try to explain this to people is that, first of all, this is equipment that's gonna be out in the elements for 365 days of the year. It's also gonna be heavily, heavily, heavily used. This is equipment that's gonna be used more than anything that you would put in your house or anywhere else. So that's where where the cost goes. I mean, one of the other, people also look at the surface, and I talked about a wood chip or a wood type surface. It is not mulch. It's material that has been cleaned. It has been approved by the safety codes, and that's why it is much more expensive than wood chip. So a large number of what the cost will be for the project, this phase 1 will be the wood carpet surfacing, which includes also, it's a 12 inches of that wood carpet, and this cost that you're seeing here also includes a certain amount of base material that you have to have underneath. And we will be recycling some of the gravel that's on the site already, so to bring down cost, so we don't have to provide 12 inches of gravel material if we already have some of that there. But I think that's the main cost. The other, the new play net would be a $20,000 item, if we were to include that, and I think those are the two main costs that we're looking at. We will be recycling some of the existing play equipment that's there and improving the bigger piece of play equipment that's there, so that by changing some aspects of it, making it more accessible. So we're trying to work with what we have, understanding that this is very expensive equipment, and very expensive on the safety surface part of it and drainage. So trying to use some of the existing equipment and relocating it to be reused. But I think that's the kind of the details of what the project is all about.
Carlos, can you just review which, you mentioned that we're gonna be taking out the old equipment, so that big tall slide, can you just tell me which exact items are coming out?
This gives us a little bit of justice. We have 2 slides, metal slides that are there that are totally off of code.
Mhm.
We have what I call the igloo, where it's kind of a dome structure, totally off of code. We have a structure that's a small climber. It has these kind of a chain.
Yep.
It's a
Mhm.
chain climber, also out of code. And we have, there is a this playground has already been kind of redone at some point. It was probably 25 years ago or something like that. So there's a piece of equipment that everybody asks me, what is that there? There's like a frame for some type of swing, but there's nothing there. So we will be removing that. That was removed back when it was redone, because it wasn't on code at that point. So that's why they didn't leave that swing there. So that will be the equipment we will be taking out. We will be recycling or reusing. There's a yellow wiggly climber that's totally usable. And then the large play structure, the one that has the 2 canopies on it, we will be removing part of it, the slide, because it's not working, and there's nothing that we can actually use right now that's comparable that will fit the play equipment. So what we are envisioning is probably by phase 2 adding something similar to this, to the existing play structure on the back end, to substitute those items that we were taking out. But, yeah.
Those slides are terrifying. They're terrifying. They're just,
Well,
I can't believe they stayed there this long. They're so tall and so barren on such a hard surface.
I think,
incredible.
2 things that made me at least, moved me into really pushing to this playground was that, first of all, complaints of parents with kids who had falls and had, I believe, broken bones or at least sprained bones in here. And then going out and doing a safety check where we take equipment that checks how much give the surface has, and basically it's like concrete. It's like if you were falling from 6 to 5 feet high into just the floor. So that's first thing that I think made me think about it. The second thing was was there with my son while there was a child with disabilities whose parents, mom wanted him to enjoy the playground. So she was helping him go up these slides, which, I was almost cringing watching this. They're extremely dangerous. Also, it's just the surface is not, you should have seen this mom struggling trying to push a wheelchair all the way to this slide to then try to carry their kid up to the slide, and then knowing that if he loses balance up there, you're going down 10, 12 feet into basically concrete.
Yeah.
So after that, I started talking to other people, all the people in school committee and people in the PTO, and saying we got to deal with this. And I think having at least a plan and starting off and going at it is, the first step at it.
Excuse me, so would all of those surfaces be redone that we're seeing here?
So we would have, for phase one, we would be just doing, resurfacing the area where the main amount of playground equipment, not the slides. Slides would have to
No,
go
the
in into,
swings.
the swing, sorry. Those would have to go in a separate, phase.
See, just the.
Just the top. One of the things that, and actually, if you see, where is the detail? If you notice, we've actually chopped a big chunk of what's the existing. We've reduced the size of the safety surface to reduce costs in a way, also because this playground is extremely large. And one thing that people in my industry understand is like if you have a very big, large playground, it means it's a lot of safety surface. Even if you don't have a lot of playground equipment, you're still investing a lot on this surface that you have to have there. So we are reducing the size of the existing playground, not reducing the amount of play equipment because we'll eventually have probably more than what we have right now there, but we'll be reducing the size of the area.
So are you saying that, after this proposed phase one, the
Mhm.
112,000, there would still be surface
We
on
would
there
still
that's
have
not safe?
where the swings are. Yeah, and the swings themselves would not be necessarily totally safe or accessible. And this is one approach. ADA law, allows you, and I've had this issue with other towns or in other schools, for instance. We want to have a plan. If somebody, normally the Access Board, Massachusetts Access Board, if somebody puts out a complaint, they'll come to the school or to the town and say, we have this complaint, what are you doing about it? And that's where having a kind of a 3 or 4 phase plan and showing that we are actually moving towards making it accessible and safe, we might not be in code by phase one, but we are looking like we're doing something about it. Where I think that's, I don't know if that's your concern, that we're gonna have some safe area, but then we're gonna have some areas that are not safe. The reality is that playgrounds are so expensive that that's the approach that a lot of places do, where you start kind of phasing it in.
Have you guys done a comprehensive or an overview budget for all of the phases that
Well,
would be?
With this first phase, we were really surprised, like these folks were saying about the softball field, we were really surprised how many people in the community started stepping up and saying, well, I can do that, and so there's $3,000. I can give that, that's $1,000. So it started chunking away at this phase one number, and unfortunately, the problem with chunking away at the big numbers are this safety surface has to be done first. And that's the part that feels the least bit CPA. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's a safety surface, but it's like building a house without a foundation. It's like, we all want a foundation in our home. We don't want to live on a slab, so that's the struggle, is to get this safety surface done and prepared for everything to go on top of it and around it.
I think Sarah is, if I'm not mistaken too, is I want to know, like, so if we did all 3 phases, is that $300,000? I was wondering. Yeah, I want to get, because part of me, I want to know, so let's say we're looking at, we have this vigilance over money that has been spent by the taxpayers, and there's I sort of make the analogy to like a PTO budget or a select board or a VFW fundraising account. The goal is to spend it on behalf of the people to benefit the people while we have it. So having a sense of scale about the phases is something we should look at so we can, map it against projects and budget too. It'd be good to know. Because like, what if we say surface, if we bring in the people to redo the surface for the now smaller footprint current place where the equipment is, what if we know we want, so I think swings are a necessary piece of a playground, right? And like, hello, right? But that's a pretty serious situation as well. Have you guys considered reducing that and fixing the swings there, and what would just that extra piece cost? I'm kind of curious.
Yes, I mean, I think in the overall plan, we've reduced the size of where the swings are, and actually reduced the amount of swings. There's, 3 bays of nine swings in total there, where, probably the kids are using maybe 2 of these bays. They're not using the 9 same time. So future-wise, I was showing different types of swings to smaller areas, so we reduce a little bit of that safety surface, so we're saving some money there. I mean, I think in ballpark, if we were looking at this, and I'm saying ballpark, we're looking between 400 and 500,000 for the total thing. I mean, we're looking at 100 and some for what we're proposing now. If we wanted to do the next phase, we're talking about $70,000, $80,000 worth of play equipment we would like to add, beyond what we're doing now. And then for instance, each one of these exercise stations for adults run between $5,000 and $10,000 each. You have pavement, So I think in the overall big picture, we're looking at between 400, 500, and I could probably give you a much more detailed number for that, in the next couple of weeks. But we did focus on the numbers for the playground because I knew that's where we had to start. And for instance, for safety surface, one of the points that Tracy makes is that if we're gonna, we're gonna remove the safety surface, you gotta remove all the play equipment.
Right, it's all the labor of taking
So
everything out of there.
you cannot say, I'm gonna work around this,
Right.
because you can't. It's labor time is impossible to do it. You really wanna be able to put equipment in here and actually move all this stuff at once without, having to wheelbarrow stuff.
But along those lines, I mean, wouldn't it make sense to do all the surfaces at once in terms of like cost effectiveness?
They are actually pretty separate. That swing section is really separate from, there's grass in between.
Yeah, there's a piece of grass in between.
Right.
We're looking at almost the same amount of safety surface on one side and the other. So we're looking at $120,000 without even moving play equipment. Or we're looking at $60,000, $70,000 without having moved any type of play equipment. So I think we made the decision that let's start on this side, do all safety, and be able to actually add some type of play equipment that kids next year will use. I was very afraid, because I knew how much it cost, that if we went in and say, let's change all the safety surface, it means that it's going to be a year with no playground. Which I don't think nobody would like to see that, especially anybody who's trying to deal with a lot of kids in recess time. So that's where the train of thought went into separating the 2 safety surfaces. Yes.
Because how long would they be without?
So the second, I believe we have for phase 2, we would start looking at the safety surface on the other side.
And how long would in phase 1 would they be without the playground? How long?
Oh no, phase 1, the idea is that phase 1 we'll change the safety surface and the drainage, and we'll reinstall the bigger play equipment, which is the one with the 2 roofs, and any of the other ones that we can redo.
Almost late fall.
What's her?
So you
Be back in business, it looks like in the
Oh
fall.
yes, phase 1 we would finish it, and then they could come back and just play here. They would have play equipment, and they also would have one new play system. They'll have that net that I showed you before. So it's not, because it would be really sad. I mean, I can see how if we fixed everything, but we couldn't put anything new there. Basically, we've taken half of their playground at that point. So we wanted to actually at least put one new item in there that the
Right,
kids
it's
could be
almost
proud
a
of.
replacement. It's not like a new, like in addition to. It's like you're saying, if you're removing all that,
we need to start putting something back in there, but.
Had a question? Yeah.
You know, as an educator, I actually want to speak a little bit on how a revitalized, rejuvenated playground really adds to the development of the whole child. So often we think of schooling as strictly their cognitive development. Playgrounds provide kids with the opportunity to learn in the cognitive, social, and psychomotor domains. And, you know, playgrounds allow them to learn in creativity, build self-confidence, teaches them risk-taking, conflict resolution skills, to name a few, problem-solving. So recess and outdoor play really is a fundamental part of a kid's development. So many of the skills that they learn during unstructured times are what help them later on in life. So play for kids really is, it's not a luxury, but it's a necessity. It's an absolute necessity as part of their development. And you know, Sunderland Elementary School already has so much to offer. And this type of project is gonna make the school even more well-rounded. And well-rounded kids come from well-rounded schools. And that's part of their development. So I think that's something that's really important to consider, the development of the whole child. So.
Yeah, no, and just to add to that, is, and also thinking of this as a resource for the whole town.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
I think, I mean, I'm a landscape architect, so I'm a geek about space and all these things, but, you know, if you think about, we are, you know, except for the fact that it used to be a swamp, but this is like a very important spot in town. It's right in the center of everything. People from all sides of the center of town have access to this place, and they do, and they walk either from the apartments, they walk in here and play basketball and use the playgrounds, people from the other side of Main Street. I mean, I think it's not just for the school, I think it's also for the well-being of all the kids in Sunderland, where they don't have somewhere that they can use.
Other comments?
I think the project sounds great. I am thinking about the funding of it. I remember when we had the CPA speech a long time ago, a guy from Belchertown came and talked about leveraging projects. And I looked at the project you just talked about, and you got about a 50-50 match. I look at the numbers here, it's not close. And my question is, I guess about grants. Did you guys look into grants at all?
We were just a little bit late for February, January and February. We got started on this in, late November and, have been working on it. So, there's grant opportunities that we missed. And there's grant opportunities we're still working on. And there's, capital requests that we're working on. And, but this is what we have right today.
No, I appreciate it, and I think it's a well-worth project, but our job is to figure out how best to spend funds. And if you came with a project saying we have 50 grand and we're looking for 45 or whatever the number is from you guys, it's certainly carries, at least with me, carries more weight.
Sure.
So that's my only comment is how do we get, this I think is worthwhile. I agree with everything you said about it being important for kids. We all remember being on the playground and of course we use slides like you're getting rid of, but and things probably worse than that, but
Keep on it right, Mike.
but that's a couple knocks in the head with so I think the recreation and being good for kids is all very valid, but I just how do we get there?
Because I have a comment, if the whole total project is like $400,000 or $500,000 and this is like the first phase of it, and if we miss the February, there'll probably be another February grant, so we can leverage phase 2 or 3.
There's the thought about how big do you want to include the whole thing and try to get a grant? I mean, I don't know, but I'm just thinking that,
One item that and this is one of the parts that I kind of miss is that by being the designer normally and being involved with the projects, I do not deal with the grants, I deal with the other end.
Right.
But on that same note, there are several, there are grants and opportunities to buy equipment, but not a lot to buy safety surfacing and drainage and all that stuff. So right now, most of the equipment that I've looked at right now is provided through what's called US Communities, which is a buying pool, so you don't have to go through open bid processes and all this stuff, so you can save some money on that end. So I think phase 2 probably will be easier to get grants for equipment itself, because we're looking at more equipment. And in phase 1, we're still looking at probably having some savings of what we're showing right now, being a little bit more conservative with our cost estimate.
We're being super conservative because a lot of it's labor, and what if they don't show up?
Yeah.
Then we're on the hook, and we just want to be really honest about it.
Again, and the equipment bought through US Communities will be less probably than what we're putting on, but I'm showing cost the way that I would put it for any other project that I have to be conservative when we're putting those numbers in. But I do definitely understand your point.
Actually, Mike, if I could speak to that point,
Yeah.
I think that I also am the president of the Sunderland PTO, and we do a lot of grant work, and there is little, like you said, a little bit here, a little bit there, this kind of thing. I want to first of all tell you that this project is huge. The human energy and planning resources that are required to take on this beast. People have been poking a stick at this for a decade, and I'll tell you why people like me have been scared off by it and other people. It's because it is a lot. I think that there's a human energy and capital investment here that's not reflected in the numbers, and I'm going to say shame on you for not valuing your own investment differently here, Carlos. I think that we are looking at a much more matched ask than is estimated here on the numbers. I think that the fact that we have some really capable people, Tracy, you and your husband are very capable and knowledgeable in the world of construction and planning and large projects and scales and budgets and how that works. Carlos, we have a top grade playground designer who happens to be a parent donating his time right now. I will tell you that a moment in time where we have two forces of people who already have full lives willing to donate the leadership, the energy to a project like this is not something that will happen every year for the next 10 years. And as a community, we do have to look at leveraging the energy of a situation and the people willing to lead it as one of the resources that we are benefiting from. So I think that in a very smart effort to be conservative with your estimates, I think it's important that you value the time and energy of not just any old, do-gooder parent, but highly qualified professionals who have built million-dollar construction projects and parts materials, and designers who have actually built 6 public spaces and understand about what the grants are. If you two or people in your group weren't available to support this project, we would be at bake sale level, and these charts wouldn't be here. So I really feel like it's worth noting that estimate doesn't exist in this calculation, and it should be thought of as we look at the number.
Yeah, I mean, the first approach I had, when we started this probably 3 years ago, when we started looking at the playground and kind of moving people about it. But even after that, when we started kind of going after CPA funds and everything else, I mean, one of the time-wise and resource-wise, basically I asked my office and went like, hey, by the way, I've been approached, the town wants a cost estimate for design services. And my office went like, well, why don't you just design it? I'm like, well, I never have time. And he's like, well, just, we'll give you time. So we skipped one whole part of the CPA thing. I mean, normally I've gone probably to 3 or 4 meetings just for design services. It is very...
Which isn't it, that's not in our match. See, that's not in there.
Should be.
And that's valid.
Deserves to be.
It should be there. Yeah.
Right.
It should be there, yes.
Should be there.
So can we add it?
Yes.
Yes, of course, absolutely.
Yes.
It's
Would you
important.
take your application out of the room for a minute?
See those blue books?
Richard, if I could please.
Tom would like to speak. Go ahead, Tom.
I've had the opportunity to get down in Fairfax County to the Clean Gentori.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing better to see a fully accessible playground. But that was like $5-9 million.
Yeah.
Okay? And that was a lot, that was all done basically through donations as well, from a very involved family. Michael's point's well taken, and we have to look at, right now, Richard has, the first sentence, or the first thing Richard had us do was look at the revenue for this year. Our revenue this year from taxes in the town of Sunderland is $93,000. We will have matched of approximately 100%, we hope, it's $93,000. We're looking at $92,000 for one project, one phase. Michael's point also was talked about leverage. You're all right about leverage, but we have sidewalks that need to be built down in South Sunderland, along Plumtree Road, North Plain Road, South Plain Road. We have elderly housing that we haven't even touched upon. We have low mod housing so that we can get out from underneath this 40B. Now, if you talk about leveraging, you look at doing a project for $500,000 and use this money, portions of it, to fund that. So wouldn't you be better off saying you're gonna come up with a project and then bond that project and use a portion of the CPA to fund that every year versus trying to pay for it every year?
It's possible. That's
And-
part of the way some towns do use CPA money, they borrow it.
And that's leveraging, not, and I'm not, because I've done a lot of volunteering, I'm not saying that people's time isn't leveraging that expense, but if you're trying to leverage $500,000, you come back next year for 90. And the other point is that we're governed by law how much we can spend in each phase of recreation, preservation areas also.
Tom, are you aware of are there people who have put together projects and estimates? Because the 6 projects we have aren't representing the laundry list that you just ran through, so.
There are none projects.
Right, but so my question with that is that in addition to the balance of the funding, which I think is a very valid point, we do have to look, we are held to spending the money distributed against the different categories, and that we do have to look at the finances of that as a committee. But I'm interested as a committee, I'd like to know what the rest of my committee members think about how we feel about hoarding money in the coffers versus spending it, and what we think our responsibility to the tax base is to spend the money versus saving the money if there aren't spoken for long-range projects articulated against that. Now, Tom, you have an amazing access to knowing what's out there for me, but if it's not represented here, then speaking to it doesn't feel comfortable to me.
Well, just because someone comes to the table first, doesn't mean that to come to the table first, that they should have the total access. And it behooves us as a group to look at long-term projects and bring those, and that should be part of the decision-making process.
I don't think that we can make decisions based on projects that aren't presented to us, though.
Of course you can.
I think that's hard to do.
Well, I don't know. I think you can get close to knowing where you're gonna be. We understand the 4 project areas, and we understand what it takes to put aside the money. And I think we also know how near-term some of these other asks are gonna be. For example, in housing, we got a lot of thinking to do before we're gonna spend any money. We're short of good ideas right now, so it's gonna take us a little bit to kind of figure out what we're gonna do in that category. In historical programs, we're above the curve. They're fine.
We're fine.
They're very creative, and they got projects for us every year. And the open space one is not in bad shape right now either. We have money sitting there ready to use. So you study the puts and takes and the 10%, and we may be able to have a big chunk one-off year. To me, this profile we're looking at now is not a going-ahead one for every year. This is at best a one-time for recreation.
I don't disagree with you, Richard, and I think to kind of keep going on it, that's where, you start developing, there's more time to deal with grants and inserting things after, and dropping those parts in after the safety surface is squared away and we've been a responsible community and we've, started to redevelop a fantastic space in a responsible way.
Yeah.
Right, It actually
For-
gives you an up on getting the grants, because
Right.
you've already shown that you put
Exactly,
money in.
right, and we've got, there's been a learning curve here with this process, and, it's only gonna look better going forward, but certainly not coming to this committee every year saying, hey, can I have another $100,000?
That won't happen, right?
I'm not gonna do
That's a
that.
no- that's a
I don't know
no-go.
if Ben is, or
Yeah.
Justine, or Carlos, but
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good
Yeah.
idea.
For me, we're almost at a defining moment for the whole story, in my opinion, of what can we do in this town with CPA? Are we able to do projects of this size, at that $500,000 size? My belief is yes. I've just listened to a lot of pretty bright people around the table, with some good thought on it. So I don't think it's out of bounds for us. I think we could do it. We haven't figured out the finances quite right yet.
Yeah, and I just wanna say that, like, in answer to Shauna's question, that is my feeling about the CPA, to be looking at the long range and having a long-term vision and looking at $500,000 projects, taking the couple of years it takes to put together that Belchertown project. The CPA only paid for 1/6 of the project because they put together different sources of funding. And I think that what I would like to see is us using this platform as a way to put together really big projects that could make a big difference to the town.
Yeah.
And not, not kind of just chipping away and just dishing out with just an annual view.
Right.
Well, this isn't an annual view,
Right.
right?
No. I think what we're seeking here is a little more forward thinking on the out years, to get a better handle on the whole. I think sooner rather than later, it would be useful for our committee to have a number for the total, even if it's not as precise as the phase one, just a closer to even a feasibility number that we can think of as that's the total package, and think of it that way. And then how to get there. If you don't mind, I'm reminded of one incident in our town a few years ago with our school district. And Tom and Mike will know this and remember this. The school superintendent came to us and told us we had big trouble with the office they're in. We have to find a new office space. That Christian Lane area the building is terrible, and what are we gonna do about it? And it was about a $500,000 discussion. And what the four towns did, and we were part of that, is we split it up. Took about 4 or 5 years, and we did it in chunks where the credibility came each year. We both said we'd do it, and then it did it. And without making it difficult, a $500,000 project got done. And it got agreed to by 4 towns. And I think it's possible to have that sort of strategy. You figure out what the total is and put something up that's reasonable year by year. Now, for me, one part is important to me is to get to the code areas as soon as possible. I'm not comfortable with the idea that we're gonna leave a batch of land out there unsatisfied, not fixed. So I would like to see what it would take in phase one to do all the base work. So there's no code issues having to do with the ground right away. Tell us what that number is. I also feel that there's a lot of grant opportunities, that those that come and get grants come with something on their side. They got the skin in the game already, you know? I want to get $50,000 from you, but I already got 20. So I don't want to leave this effort penniless going into phases 2, 3, and 4, and not having something to go to someone else and say, can you match that up? So I think we have to find a way in which some of the money sooner rather than later is labeled for this. So as you do your grants and you do your pursuit, you have something to offer as part of the ante. And grant people look at that all the time. They want to know, what's your skin in the game? Do you have anything, what are you going to put into this? So to go into 3 and 4, phases 3 and 4, which are beautiful ideas, penniless, you're going to say you're going to do it all on volunteers and so on. It's too weak a story. I think you need to say the town has got this much reserved. Now let's go find the other half. So that means the money we start with has a little longer year value to it as well. It's just not getting off the ground.
And that's what we mean by leveraging it.
Yeah. But you don't leverage without something to leverage. Right? So I think the creative work now in front of us is to figure out how to do that, be consistent with the balance we need, If it's a loan, okay, or maybe it's some capital money. You know, Marty's answer to balancing and cost share is to just use money from another part of government, you know? So we could add a few dollars to a capital plan in town and maybe have 10, 15 off to the side that can be used to leverage phases 3 and 4. Wouldn't that increase our likeliness of getting a match in a grant? I think it would. So I applaud you. I think this is breakthrough work, in my opinion, for a town of our size to be able to accomplish that is a wow. And I think we're close. You guys have demonstrated we have the talent, we have the ability, we just haven't figured out the numbers
Need a
yet.
strategy.
We need a financial strategy.
Financial strategy, yeah.
Do you agree?
Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to say that I also agree that we need to be careful with how we're spending our CPA money. And one of the reasons I was involved in helping to pass the CPA in town was to get projects done that weren't getting done with town money, and to leverage the state money, the other 90,000 that's coming into the pot, and to use that for projects that weren't getting done. And this is, for me, this is exactly one of those projects. It's been kicking around, we're not touching it, we're not dealing with it. It should be on a capital plan at the town level to get things into that playground, fixed up, and we know where it happens with capital in this town, and the CPA is a place where this can get dealt with. And so it's, you know, there's rusty things on this playground. It can't be pushed aside again. So I'm in full support of this. I know we're not voting tonight, but but it is, I want to just remind people that we're getting that state money with the CPA, so it's not all the town money. And going forward, I think, is where we're going to get more grants for more. But I think it should be on the town budget as well.
Yeah, can I ask, like, why is it in the town capital budget, and if not, why not?
We asked that question this week. We got an answer, and so there's paperwork to do and committees that need to vote, and so we're late, you know, so it just takes time. So, but the question was asked, so I'm happy to report that.
Well, you could say that keeping a safe playground is not extra ideas and something, it's fundamental to.
Right, it's fundamental and
The
it's
principal's
necessary.
description of how the playground fits into the school day and required for education is right on. So it's our job to provide a safe, it's not like extra credit.
Right, and I mean, it's one thing to, you know, and money was raised and parents donated time the last time a playground was done. But, you know, that's a lot of bake sales and a lot of fundraisers, and like we've all said, this started years ago, and, you know, to get people to do it and to commit to it, I mean, to commit to raising $100,000, to even raising $5,000, if you haven't done a fundraiser, it's a lot of work.
Yes.
And it's a lot of, you know, and not that we're not willing to do it. I mean, we fundraised, you know, the school built a pavilion. We had the surface redone. That was donated from a company in town. There's all sorts of things that happen at the school that money is donated and funds are raised. But something in this scale, there was no group that was willing to say, sure, we'll do that. We'll raise $100,000, because we all knew that's because we've had Carlos, you know, telling us all along. And really, that's just too much.
Too much.
You know, and it is. It's our responsibility, and that's why we're here, because we do feel that sense. I mean, I wanted to take those things out yesterday. You know,
She
they
did.
saw me have
She
a
wanted
fit.
to.
I
She
literally
did
wanted
want
to
to
call
take-
someone and say, come take those slides down. Because that's how serious it is. So, but you're right. I mean, kids, we've played on it. It's okay. We've had our you know, the head of the schools. He's looked at them, but it's, you know, so it's a huge project, but it's so necessary, and it's, you know, it's one way or
Okay.
another.
I hate to cut this off. Our time is running though, so I think we'd be better. This is a very good conversation. Appreciate the presentation. It is a turning point, in my opinion. Okay, if you have to keep moving, as slow as we're moving.
Actually, you want to keep this quick.
Yeah, it is.
Read all the-
All right, Linda's
That
gonna
was
give us
worthy
some.
of extended conversation.
Oh, yeah,
I think this is
absolutely.
exactly, you know, when you think, why do I want to get involved in CPA? Taking on something of that scale, it's an exciting, and it's a very good point that nobody can take on with our capital crisis in our town, our revenue crisis with the schools where they are. Something like this, it's not math and science, that is so hard to organize funds for a $400,000 safety improvement or to fill, you know. And the other thing too is I thought about, well, probably I can't
We're
remember.
gonna keep going.
I think we're gonna.
Can someone tell me the real time?
Yeah, it's not 1 o'clock.
8:45.
Oh, my God.
Well, you're 15 minutes.
Gary, did you get to eat dinner? It's a nice theory.
She enjoyed saying that.
And has Margaret left the scene, or is she still here?
She was here.
She was here, she probably left.
Linda is willing to summarize what Wendy Clark, and Wendy Hula's put in. So I think without shortchanging Wendy in her project, I'll ask Linda to do a very quick description of it.
Right, the next project is continuation of historic records preservation. And basically what this is it's a project that was originally proposed in 2012, and the total project price was around $23,000. And it was thought of at the time that it would be best to break it into 3 separate projects. And the first thing I want to say is that this money would normally be coming out of the town's operating budget. So this is a very good use of CPA funds to use this, to just take it out of the operating budget for the town. So in 2012 at the town meeting, it was approved for project, for the first phase of the project, and that was about $7,500. And that did a lot of preservation for some militia record books that we had from around the 1820s, for the selectmen's books having to do with cash and how it was spent during the 1800s, a lot of birth records, and some microfilm that was in the process of deteriorating. So these were records, town vital records that needed to be restored. And so that was done in 2012. In 2013, it was decided not to go after phase 2, but to wait a year. And so here we are in 2014, and the town clerk, Wendy, has asked that we do the phase 2 section of this, which is around $7,200. And that's going to preserve what's called the first book of our town, which includes all of the records that happened between 1713, when the town was first established, or started to be established, until around the middle 1700s, along with burial permits and marriage records. So these are vital records to the town. Our records are so old that they're starting to deteriorate, and when people have to touch them, you know, it's causing preservation problems. And so going through and having these redone is you know, what's being requested. So again, this is the second phase of a project that was basically approved. So I don't know that there's a lot of discussion, but I'm open to trying to answer questions, and if I can't, then I'll push them off to Wendy and she can get back to you.
2 things. One is just for the people who weren't involved in the first time around. This is something that's legally required of us.
Correct.
As a town.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
wow.
so we don't really have any choice.
We have to do the record, yes. We have
And
to
so
preserve the
by
records.
doing with CPA, we get it for 50 cents on the dollar of
correct.
something we
Right,
have
right.
to do anyway. But the other point is,
Plus what categories
when-
spend against.
when we first looked at this, the budget was 22,000, and
Oh, I just
since
rounded
then,
it up to
oops, it went
23.
up to 96,000.
We did?
Yeah.
Wendy will have to answer that one.
Yeah,
All I
right,
know
you're
is
looking at
that-
my application.
Are you sure you're not looking at Tracy's application?
No, because when Wendy.
I think all of the records,
All of them.
all of them are like 122,000,
Yeah.
I think.
96, 360.
Right, but she went after in the first project
Yeah.
that she was proposing, the 23,000 is for the records that are the most in need of preservation.
Right.
And
Ultimately, we're gonna have to do.
ultimately, we'll have to do the other ones, but they're not
So that gets
pressing.
to
I mean, they-
1770, is what we're
1713.
getting there, folks. We're making a dent. We're chipping away, as it were. Here we go. We've locked down 1738,
obviously-
folks. It's locked
Obviously,
down.
the ones that are like maybe 50 to 100 years old are not in quite the same condition that would need to be preserved.
Totally.
I don't wanna belabor this, but have you guys ever looked into whether there are any kind of grants for this sort of stuff? Just since we're
Wendy
looking
would
at
have to answer that.
96,000, huh?
Yeah, Wendy would have to answer that from, from her perspective. I know that there are grants that you can get to preserve certain things, but I don't know that there are any grants for town records.
Is there a precedence for CPA committees to become a resource for grants and information about grants for parties who are looking to offset the total cost of their projects?
Well, there's a coalition we belong to that does a lot of side research. They may do something like that.
Because I think that,
Worth
again, we're
asking.
talking about people with full-time jobs and
Right.
lives, and it is, I don't know if you've ever filled out some
Oh, yeah,
grant
yeah, yeah.
proposals.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
maybe facilitating getting where we want to be with this might be a thought.
okay. I would propose we move on.
Okay.
Margaret, are you ready? Sorry for taking so long.
Sure.
We got still more surprises to go here, I think.
She brought bricks.
You can all pass down, here.
We're passing bricks.
We've got some nice thermal finish granite,
Yeah,
nice bricks.
we're really getting in,
Show and tell.
We have handouts.
we were getting
Get some
involved in
water.
basins.
It's like 90 degrees in here.
It is.
Nothing wrong with these, you know, holes.
That was only number 4. Nice to have
Don't die.
All right,
concrete evidence here, isn't it?
Yes. Helen's mentioning we're having nice concrete
I
proposals.
like
today.
visuals. Nice visual effects.
Okay, these are the revised proposals. You can pass those around. I'll try to start.
Fancy handouts.
You have a presentation? Wow.
Oh,
Just had to show off.
There was something right there.
She's got the technology.
Seriously? We have her number. She must be like an older
I bet she's
sister.
gonna
My
go in
big
color,
sister.
too.
Of course she has
I
it.
really need it, so. Pathways wants to go first while I try to give this thing.
Well, I think we're doing, adding a brick facade.
Oh, this is the historical
Brick
design.
facade.
Oh.
Snazzy, is this like snazzying up the front of this building, right?
This is snazzy at the front of this building.
Front steps to this building.
I always like to use the technical terms. Snazzying up the front of the
Okay,
building, eh?
this is the grand entrance,
Mistaken it epinoids.
grand entrance proposal.
Giving us the mayor podium.
This one was,
You can make this a lengthy.
Is, I think that's,
this one,
this is 3-4, this is
2,
3-2.
3. This one doesn't have a price on it.
Well, I am not going to do this
25,
presentation
15,
without my PowerPoint, so I apologize. I apologize for the delay.
Okay,
The summary is
Where to
The
learn Margaret.
cost is on that front page,
you
though.
want us to swift?
25 total
You want-
project, 15 CPA requested, 10 matching, 40%. Where's your magic?
I think the last project
Holy
deserves some
moly, you
conversation.
got-
How
Yeah.
long is that
Password.
password? So no
18
one will hack into that.
No one's gonna break the code on that one.
Sunderland is safe, folks.
I'm not getting anything on my screen, so I'm gonna.
Seriously, if anyone's laptop is holding
there
her,
in order to
it's hers.
try to-
We're
Do you
moving.
wanna have room on the table? Can you switch around?
Smaller spin
I think I'm okay, so it's fine to where.
Shift F8 isn't working here.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
That's annoying.
it's a good point. You gotta be able to switch it. How do you think? Big picture or small picture? Holy mackerel, let's find out what she's really doing.
Wow.
Yeah, let's hope it's all worth
She
it,
thinks
right?
she can,
Wow.
she thinks she can.
Let's hope it's worth it. Okay,
Conceptual pictures.
so, okay, so here is our proposal. Now, for anybody
That's your proposal.
new on the CPC, this is
Okay.
I think it's the third year. Slideshow.
This is the proposal with resilience.
Or determination.
A little engine that could, here we go.
Okay.
That's our building, we are sitting in it as we speak, right?
So, okay, we're in the corner. Okay, so, our proposal is to, reconstruct the front entry of the town office building. Carlos, could you please show off the left bank of lights over there? Thanks. Okay. All right, now we're proposing this under the historic preservation component, and I thought that it would be worth giving a historic perspective on this project. This project, we suggest, supports efforts to return a historic property to a state of utility through repair or alteration. In this case, it would be
we're proposing to, again, reconstruct the front entry to expose a historic flood marker that's hidden behind, as you look at the building, on the left-hand side, you see a little cornerstone next to the boy at the top step. We believe it's just to the, others here might know exactly where it is, but we believe it's just to the left of that, beneath the cornerstone. So just under, say, the, under the front top or second step, somewhere right in there, down a little bit, right?
Carlos/Vanna White.
Now, we haven't, you know, there's for anybody who's walked into the front entry of this building recently, it's hard to ignore the deteriorating condition of the front steps. My request, or our request at this point, is to use a portion of funding for the project from CPA, and then I have a request to the Board of Selectmen that they haven't acted on yet from Capital Stabilization for an additional $10,000 to address the actual structural issue of the front steps. And just a very brief history. Linda, I'm sure, could just cite everything about this building, but I'll give it a shot. This was formerly called the Center School. It was constructed in 1922. It's a federal revival style building, and it was the town's elementary school until the current school was occupied in 1989. And working in this building, it's really interesting because we hear at least on a weekly basis from residents and former residents who come into this building that the office that I sit in downstairs and that Cindy sits in was their second grade classroom. This one was, I don't know, fifth grade? Fourth grade classroom. Wendy's office was the first grade classroom. And so people walk around kind of in amazement that the building still has, it's still so active and it's still used for community.
Any ghosts?
Are there any ghosts? I don't know, I've been here late enough, I should
Mrs.
pay
Dill,
attention.
of any of them, it would be Mrs. Dill, wouldn't it?
Mrs. Dill?
That was an excellent question.
Yeah.
We'd like to know if this
Okay, so
building
the
is
building
haunted.
is located in the Sunderland Center Historic District, which is registered on the National Register of Historic Places and is a numbered property with the Mass Historic Commission, correct? Okay, so moving on a little bit more. For anybody who wasn't with us or in Sunderland at the time of the Great Flood in 1936, this was a very important historical event in Sunderland's history. And I'm hoping you'll just let me read something very briefly. This doesn't directly have to do with the steps, but I found it fascinating. When I looked up a little bit of information on the Great Flood, I came across an article that was printed by that was put into newspapers across the country, and this happens to be an excerpt from the Dallas Morning News in Dallas, Texas on March 25th, 1936. It says, Governor Curley, Massachusetts governor at the time, resubmitted to the legislature a proposal for an $8 million relief bond issue, which was rejected last week before the floods. And he also announced a statewide tag day would be held Saturday to raise funds for flood victims. And an appeal was sent to Washington to double the state's quota of 125,000 WPA workers, the Works Progress Administration, FDR's program. Damage in Massachusetts was estimated at $200 million in 1936 standards.
Wow.
So it was significant. But this photo shows, obviously from the South Deerfield side, you can see this Sunderland Elementary School right in the center of that picture, and which bore some of the brunt, along with the entire village center in Sunderland of the Great Flood. All right, got off topic a little bit, but this is the bridge marker that's on the current bridge. This bridge was erected in 1938 from emergency relief appropriation, and this is the bridge that replaced the former bridge that crossed the Connecticut River.
But not in the same spot.
Not in the same spot. You're right. Not in the same spot. It is over. Okay. Now I have to discuss project need. there's a need. Okay, the current concrete poured steps and landing were constructed in 1996. It's not clear to me, we haven't been able to identify in the files why or how the historic flood marker was covered during construction. The front entry of the building is not code compliant and is in poor condition. Then there is heavy foot traffic in the building on a daily basis. It's used day and night for municipal government operations, generally during the day. This building houses the treasurer collector's office, board of selectmen's office, town clerk, assessors, accountant, board of health, recreation, telecommunications, planning board, conservation commission offices, and then, of course, meetings here at night quite frequently. This building is used for citizen groups. They rent rooms in this building, and there's actually going to be a scout troop using a room in this building on a weekly basis in the near future. So this building is used not only by official town committees and boards, but it's used by civic organizations as well. I'll add, this building also is used for recreational programs. We have a senior yoga program that happens here weekly, and there is a line dancing recreation program that happens here on Tuesday night. But anyway, the condition of the steps, as you can see, is significantly deteriorated. One more of those pictures looking down. So, our request. The request that we submitted to the CPC is for concrete reconstruction of the front steps and the porch in accordance with building code, ADA regulations, and historic preservation standards. The proposal would narrow the porch area in order to expose the historic flood marker. And we gave a project cost estimate from a vendor of $24,450. That design, or that proposal, did not require formal design or a stamped engineered drawing. The building commissioner was requiring a sketch to scale with the measurements, just evidencing that the project would be in compliance with code. So again, the request is for $15,000. For this project, $15,000 in CPA funds and $10,000 in matching funds from capital stabilization. Now, you've just received the alternate proposal. This alternate proposal is from the same vendor, and this would enhance the entry to provide granite slab steps and a granite slab porch with a railing surrounding to make it ADA, well, to make it code compliant, and the step height, width, and railing widths would be ADA compliant. And the goal here is, based on discussions that we've had and suggestions that we've received, to give it a more architectural appearance, you might say.
In keeping with
the style of the building, and I'm going to show you that.
Margaret, excuse me,
Yes.
the first one is for concrete,
The first one's for concrete.
and this one's for granite.
That's correct.
I have one question, if I may. Since we have an elevator in the back, do the front steps still have to adhere to ADA compliance?
They still have to adhere to ADA compliance. They don't. We have to have signage, and we also have to have things like you can't have lips on the stairs. Even though we do have an elevator, there are things that have to comply with ADA standards.
Yeah, because once they get in, then they still have all these other crappy steps.
That's-
I mean,
Well, you know, you're absolutely
big deal,
right.
they're at the front door.
There
Now
are
they
also
can't go
levels.
anywhere.
It would
Levels of restrictions, so and not necessarily a person with a wheelchair will.
Yeah.
So somebody with a cane, which
Right.
is not accessible,
Okay.
then
Then
Right.
not necessarily has to go to the elevator.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have copies of those
You have
regs if at some point you're interested,
seems
or you
they
can
get
find them
dragged.
online.
You have to go back and you have to restore, the tread heights have to be like 6
They-
and 7/8 to 7 1/4 inch. Then the width of the treads have to be so much.
Right.
And also, if you look on the guardrails that they have, the
Yeah.
handrails, right now we don't. Someone
Yeah.
could walk right off without, so there's,
Yeah.
it's under the ADA laws, but it's
Okay.
not.
Sorry, I know that's a little difficult to see, but there would be solid granite slab steps up to a granite slab entry. You would need a crane to lift a slab of granite that wide, as wide as that porch is proposed to be. So it is proposed that there would be weather-resistant silicone sealant type of material connecting, I believe it's 4 granite slabs, and then there would be smaller granite strips that outline that porch area where the railings connect to the porch.
Are the railings just black metal and square?
The proposal is for black wrought iron railings. I mean, the style can be determined by the town. Obviously, the town would want something that's as close to historically accurate as possible and in keeping with the era
Okay.
and style of the building, so. There's another view. Now, this view actually shows, the width of the porch would be 10 inches narrower than the existing porch, and our hope is that that's going to expose the historic marker. And by narrowing the width of the porch also, it's going to align with those, I call them cornerstones, that we saw in the earlier
Well,
slides.
if they align with the cornerstones, it would most likely not, then the little marker should show.
The marker should show.
Okay, so
That's
when
the
you find
idea.
marker, where is it gonna go? It's gonna stay where it is?
Our hope is that it would be exposed where it was, and I don't know the
Hopefully not
exact
damaged.
location. I wasn't here at the time.
Maybe damaged though, who knows?
Yeah.
And if it's damaged, we'd have to address that as well. This proposal does not.
If it was
We got a
grass,
proposal for a new marker next year.
or something expensive, it may have disappeared when they put the new ones on.
May have disappeared or may have been permanently preserved.
It's a US.
Time would- Entombed.
Like Han Solo.
We just don't know.
It's a USGS marker.
It's a USGS marker?
It's a
So it's the
USGS
actual-
marker.
For the
Okay.
flood though,
It's,
Yeah,
huh?
supposed to
it's
be
a,
there.
it's a flood marker.
I don't remember about
For
the
the
flood.
flood
I remember
level?
it's a USGS marker that states what the height is, your elevation at that point.
Then that would be in the ground, not on the.
No, it's on the steps. Oh, it's definitely on the steps.
It was on the steps?
When we were kids, we had to know it.
It was-
I can tell you
Studied
what the
that?
elevation is. 141 feet. But
It's been studied.
Was it on the step or was it on the
Yeah,
building?
it's good,
it's
yeah.
on the steps.
It was on the steps?
It's on the
Steps?
steps.
He built a boat and came
So
over.
unless the current
So don't count on
porch
it.
down there
Yeah.
encapsulated those steps are gone.
What happened, and this was probably 96, 97, is they just poured they just poured concrete over everything. Over the original steps, so they added 6 inches or 5 inches, whatever it is.
Okay. Well,
They just put a level of concrete over the original steps that were crumbling away.
How elegant.
So is there any chance it could be preserved if they
Oh, no,
poured
they never,
concrete on top?
the contract, when
They usually made of
we
heavy
tried, we
metal.
tried to get the contractor to go back and uncover them, but he didn't do anything to it, it's there.
Huh. But can they, I mean.
If we,
We'll find
it's
it.
impossible to know, but it's there apparently, or.
What's there?
Margaret,
Okay, well, let's get.
can I ask about the funding, this is the new funding, okay.
So the proposal again is to request $10,000 matching funds from capital stabilization. This new proposal does cover the cost of a granite slab entry with a concrete wall foundation under the porch with the brick facade. It does not cover the cost of design work. And
Do you have any numbers for design work, Margaret?
no, if you assumed it was 10%, you're looking at about $4,000 for design work.
So another asking for 29 from CPA?
It doesn't cover the cost of design work, and it assumes that the landing is mostly hollow, no more than 6 inches thick in most areas. Now, if the stairs are buried under that, I don't know whether the contractor's gonna be able to work around that, whether they can use that as part of the foundation, so.
What is the new ask for CPA funds? Because it's currently
It's
listed
the
as
same.
15.
It's the amount over the $10,000.
So is it?
For this
29.
design,
Are
it
you
would
asking for
29.
29,
plus
650.
10%?
That's correct.
It says 29,650 is the CPA ask, so that would.
No, she's asking for 40, 43,
You're looking for 34, I
30
think it's 44,000,
30.
including the.
yeah, 34,000.
All right.
Design, including the design work, right?
So
Oh,
it's
right, so with
34,000.
34,000, okay.
34,000.
Is the total cost.
That's the total
34,000
CPA
is the cost
ask.
they're asking for CPA.
That's the CPA ask, so the total is 44, if you include design work plus 39.
What's the design work?
The design work would be an engineered drawing, I would imagine.
Well, if you don't have a good drawing of what you're gonna get whatever you get.
Oh,
So, I mean, it would be
okay.
good to have a drawing.
Dan,
You know, I've been here anytime.
Yeah, it'd be good to have a plan, so the drawing wouldn't only be structure, but somebody would do some research as far as to how exactly, I mean, the rendering was attractive, but how did they, at that time, it was the typical way that they addressed stringers and risers, the peaks of it, what might have been, the balustrade that were available, so I think that would be included in there, since you're spending a substantial amount of money, so that, to have what, I mean, I understand you want it to look good with the building and to, look good with the memorial out there, all those things are appropriate, but it's also with that much money, I think that, it should be as, period correct
Mhm.
as when it was, first done. I mean, I think that photograph is, with the kids on the steps, that's a real starting place that the designer was working with. That, let's see, and then you do some research for some other buildings, other Federal Revival buildings built in, in that time, 1910 to 1930. And hopefully find something, some kind of precedent that would substantiate what you're going to use and what, the amount of wrought iron work, and it's got to address codes and there's rules now, but I think it'd probably be well spent
Yeah,
to get what you want.
right, and, but I'm guessing if all that work was done, the specs could change, and then the
That's-
cost could change.
That's
Yeah, the
possible.
engineer might actually find that there's ways to reduce the cost when they actually look at that, how much, I mean, certainly the services are small, the services are deteriorated, but structurally, we have something that's pretty good under there, and so we're able to, use different techniques that are less destructive. I mean, your interest really is in reducing the size, your interest is really targeted up at that upper left-hand corner.
Right.
And so that, and you certainly can get the size of the original steps off of the photograph and come close with that.
I think the historic piece is part of how we are intending to spend this money against that category for our CPC guidelines. And
Yes,
so
that's what that is.
I think that the design piece actually would make me feel comfortable that we were addressing that with some class and style. And also with some context for the vision for the usage. I think we have a lot, like I always picture on Memorial Day, we always have an
that's-
event there. And I think that how we use that front, that it's almost like
It's the backdrop.
the
to
mayor and the
veterans.
podium and it gives us a spot.
That's what's on
Right.
TV every time.
So I feel like the design piece is actually a key piece to us spending it as it's intended here in a historic piece.
Yeah, to your opinion, is 10% or a $4,000 or $3,000 cost for design fee reasonable?
Yeah, I think that the design fee at 10% is probably, I don't think it'd take a ton of work to do that. I mean, especially with that photograph that you have, it really gets you going in the right track.
We'd have to be careful, yeah, well, and I know the designer would address this stuff, the doors, the way the door opens now, there would have to be a level surface, the width, to allow for people to walk in, so. I don't know if anything about those steps were code compliant, but.
I think that kind of competency could be expected.
Okay. So Margaret, would you like to consider then that this is your proposal and we'll act on that?
I'd leave it in the hands of the Community Preservation Committee. We have a functional need here, and, based on our prior discussions, having some design in the work, would be a nice feature. So,
I guess from the historical perspective standpoint, though, if we're gonna spend the CPA funds and it's gonna be coming out of the 10% or whatever, the historical thing, then from the historical commission standpoint, we would insist upon a design.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't wanna go forward at all in
And
the
I
historical perspective without that design.
And I appreciate your comments and the fact that you'd want to be involved in the design process. I think that would be a great help.
So we could specify this.
It's okay, I just also want to say, if those concrete steps only lasted 18 years, we'll probably do better, like spending more on granite that will last, longer.
Actually,
No.
less than, because those have actually been resurfaced since.
Oh. Yeah,
So they kind of parched over the top.
It'd be a better
so-
investment for us to.
So it's
like-
not, so they just kind of, we've had that problem arise before.
I think if we did the first version of Margaret's proposal, I don't know that I would feel that it would fall at all under historic preservation. But because this is a building that is actually registered with the Historic Society, I actually feel that we're obligated to look at the second option versus the first option.
That's why it's the third year that it's been.
Right.
For consideration.
Third year's the charm? Those steps aren't going to last much longer.
It's on, but I mean, I just think the first project is sort of a spend that's much more capital and maintenance, like we just got, it would be inelegant, but I think we actually, aren't we beholden to, because this is a historic, don't we have to maintain its facade a certain way, like to some degree? I mean, am I like mistaken in the?
Yeah, we're not mandated, let's
Okay.
put it that way. There is no law in the books that say that we are mandated to do any particular thing. But if we're going to spend historic CPA funds,
Oh, yeah, okay.
then yes, you are. You have to adhere to something. If you just want to do it the other way, I mean, you could go do it. The Historic Commission would gripe about it and probably, try to get you not to do it that way, just to do a quick repair, because we'd like to see the building maintained. We have very few publicly owned buildings. I think basically this and the Graves is the only two really old buildings that we have in town that are owned. We used to have the other town hall, which is now the Blue Heron.
Oh, we have the old fire station, but used by another.
That's not really quite that old.
Okay.
It's old, but it's not old.
That's right, no, that's right.
Any other thoughts from the committee? I think we have enough information
We
here
have
to decide what we'll do. Okay, good. So let's finish up tonight with the sixth project. And,
There's another one? Good.
yeah, one more project to go.
Here we
It's
go.
called the Community Pathway System.
There we go.
I think it's, Gary and Sarah put some thought into the write-ups, I believe. Are you gonna do it for us, Gary?
Good evening. First I'll explain my clothing. This is the way we always dress in North
Really?
Sunderland.
Wow. Classic. Classic. Look at that. Wow.
Gary, I'm South Side.
Yeah.
South Side, so
South Side. I
feel
was
that, okay?
noticing your-
Just South Side, okay?
Actually, I began my day in Washington DC, and as you guys were beginning your meeting, I was just getting off of a plane from DC. And today I'm getting to experience all phases of government. I was
Wow.
in Congressman McGovern's office at 9 o'clock this morning, actually mentioning this project
Wow.
to him as a potential candidate for a pilot program that we've been talking with the Department of Transportation about how to allow communities to fund different kinds of projects through a particular program within the Department of Transportation that currently has a limit of a $50 million project, and we said that doesn't really facilitate bicycle and pedestrian sort of thing. So anyways, that explains my clothing, and I'm really glad that you had so many questions about the various other projects that I was able to make it here.
Yeah, we're almost out of gas now.
Did you get a chance to have dinner, Gary?
No, I haven't had dinner.
Oh, dinner.
But I'll have that when I get home.
Probably have a granola bar in my purse or something. I mean, I could dig around for you.
Oh, yeah, those South Side, they've always got
That's right, low rent district.
Recognizing the lateness of the hour, I won't spend too much time, and I know many of you have got varying degrees of familiarity with what we're talking about here. But there's been a group of us meeting for about a year now, talking about the Community Preservation Act monies and talking about the various elements within the community that would be fitting investments for that, and particularly relative to our anniversary coming up, 300th anniversary in just a couple of years. And one of the things that I think has really resonated with the committee members has been the idea that the kind of community we would like to leave to our grandchildren, that we would like to see 50 years down the road, is one that is really very livable for our grandchildren, where people, and very helpful for our grandchildren, where people get around and through active transportation, bicycling and walking, and that the community is not so car-centric. As I said, I was down in Washington for the National Bike Summit, which was 4 days of 1,000 people coming together from across the country, talking about how to improve the livability of communities across America. And there's many that have been extremely successful at doing that. And the reasons that communities give for it are very frequently based around the health of their citizens, around economic development, and recognizing that places that people want to live and places where communities want to, or where businesses want to grow, tend to be places that are very livable, where there's a scale that is walkable, bikeable, easy for people to get around. And one would think that the town of Sunderland is in fact the poster child for that, but in fact, as our committee has gotten together, we've recognized that there's a number of limitations, not the least of which is the center of town, which sort of divides from a bicycling and pedestrian mode for the average citizen, kind of divides it as a place that is somewhat scary, that has a very car-centric feel, and that our committee has envisioned a place that has much more of a pedestrian feel, much more of a sense that when you pull into this town, you have a sense that you have arrived in a place that cares about how people get around outside of their vehicles. Over the course of the evening, you have been hearing about a number of wonderful projects, play spaces, whether it's ball fields or playgrounds or even the steps of this building, all of which are very valid and legitimate concerns and investments. But what our committee has talked about is how do you now connect those places together so that a play space is not a place where you go and play then in your car, and then you get back in your car and you drive back to where you live. How do we create a community where you travel to the places that you want to go, whether that's Millstone, the ball fields behind this building, the post office, the elementary school, the playground, etc., that you can travel there in a healthy way by walking or bicycling, as well as enjoy healthy exercise or good governance or all of the other things that are important to the livability of our community. So the vision that we have is a series of community pathways, whether those are on road, whether those are sidewalks, whether those are natural surface trails in various places, where we're offering the citizens and visitors of Sunderland lots of different options for how they get around, and creating a safe environment, a place where there is a sense of safety not only for the bravest of us, but also for those who would feel much more comfortable with some sense of protection and an expectation that they're not going to be overtaken by vehicles, or that they're not going to have other impediments to them getting around. So the ask of the committee from the CPA funds is for $10,000 to in fact help to begin to create some images and a vision to images to flesh out this vision that we have, and perhaps working with the Department of Landscape Architecture at UMass working with some of their students to help to begin to articulate through infrastructure improvements on the ground, whether that's striping, whether that's different kind of infrastructure, signage, in other ways. How might we begin to create, especially in the mile-long North and South Main Streets, but then with an idea that this would expand out more broadly across the town, how do we begin to create a feel for a community that is very walkable and bikeable for the oldest of its citizens and the youngest of its citizens, and everyone in between, and begin to grow on that over time to help create a community that really has very much a sense of livability and active transportation. So that is our request. I'm sorry that the committee does not have matching funds of $5,000 or another $10,000, and I wish that we were able to ask you for significantly more, because I think design elements like this could potentially be much more costly, but we're really trying to be as frugal as possible as we begin to gain some ideas from designers that can help us enhance, better articulate where we would like to see this go, and the kind of treatments that might be appropriate here for relatively little money, but to really help to create that sense of place.
Gary, a little bit on how the money will be spent.
Sure. Yeah, we envision that we would go out for a request for responses or request for proposals, depending on the way that you do it. We would probably look to the university first in terms of the most cost-effective way to do it. Some of our committee members have suggested that we actually bring in a design firm to do it. And I think we would need to discuss that a little bit more among our committee members to determine the kind of what's an appropriate budget and the appropriate product there. But we would really like to, we feel there's an educational advantage to utilize UMass for that. There's some good talent in the Department of Landscape Architecture there, and we would love to utilize them. And at the same time, there are some of our members that have encouraged also looking at others as well. So essentially, it'd be some conceptual designs looking at various elements from signage to surface treatments and other ways that we might begin to facilitate that, with a particular focus on the center of town here in the 116-47 intersection, and how we might use that as the poster child for beginning to utilize some of these elements.
Any questions or thoughts?
I actually like Gary's proposal for the biggest reason. It starts to get, they've been working very hard for the last year, but now it's important to start putting things on paper, at least conceptual, so people can start having that discussion about if we want to move forward and how we're going to move forward. And a lot of times you can work in a vacuum for an extended period of time, and you may have great ideas, but all of a sudden you bring people from the outside, they may be able to tell you what kind of surfaces are practical to use, but then you can start conveying that to our members of our community, and it's going to help develop their plans for the future also.
And some of you, I certainly know Tom was very involved in the redesign of the intersection here 10 or a dozen years or so ago, and there's nothing like stirring a community discussion by having some images and some design elements that you can begin to talk about and see how that might fit. I will say that as was demonstrated in the last couple of days down in DC, the knowledge base and the approaches that are being used across the country have just come so far in the last 5 to 6 years in terms of livability. It is a completely different world in the standard designs that departments of public works use, state agencies as well as town are using around the country. Now, and I think some of those new ideas and some of those new approaches are the kind of things that we would want to try to be looking at and integrating into where we go. There is just a wealth of new approaches that are out there now that we may really prefer.
Okay.
I have a need for this concept design, I think, because I live in the village part of town. I can walk to the post office. I bike to here. I walk to here for meetings often. I walk or bike to the Millstone. My son and I bike to the school, no problem. And so I feel like it's already very livable. And it's interesting that you're focusing on the center of town where I think it is very livable. And Plumtree, not so. The sidewalk would make a big difference on Plumtree. So this design would not just be the center of town, it would look at the whole town.
And the river, I think, was part of the
River access.
I also think, though, the visual, I think that something that you said really resonates with me, and I think we're actually I think there's a lot of things, this touches a lot of different issues. One of them for me is, I feel like that downtown is not as arrivable and stoppable. Like, you know, when you're puttering and driving through little towns in Vermont, you kind of want to pull into the center of a town and walk around. We're not there. We don't have that. And I don't know that that's a priority for everyone. And I think we're talking about zoning and business and the profile of our business base. But I think that the vision for, I grew up in a very small town, Ashburnham in North Central Mass, and they've gone through a renaissance of their own trying to create this more walkable center. And I really know what Tom and them, like when you live in a town, you almost can't see what's possible. So I agree that this design phase is hugely critical. I also agree that this is necessary for me to see what you're talking about. Because if someone had told me that we were going to put lampposts down the main street of Ashburnham, I would have thought, what are we doing? You know, in front of the hardware store? Those are just weird. And then it's beautiful. It looks completely different. So I'm very much like, I got to see what this looks like. And then I just want to harken back to something that came up earlier tonight about the human capital and resources that we have access to in our sleepy town. And Gary, I know what you were explaining when you arrived and how you were dressed, but this is an exact example. The resourcefulness that we're tapping into because of your line, what you do in your work and what you're passionate about outside of Sunderland brings us a value that we're very lucky to have in our town. And I think that I get very excited when I just see anybody in our town with these specialized skills that can pull in an outside sensibility and resources about what we're doing here. So you overseeing that design project with your group is really exciting for me because I honestly also can't imagine. I'm like, all right, let's have a look, you know. So
I want to touch on your comment because it is a very powerful comment. You know, I bike all over the place. And this past year, we brought 100 cyclists into this town. They loved this town. But these are people who are prepared to bicycle across Massachusetts. They'll ride anywhere. If you look at bicycling, you essentially see that there's about 10% who are the fearless. They'll ride anywhere. They'll ride on the road. They'd ride on 91 if you would let them do it. And then, you know, I'm not sure where you are in that scale, but you're
he's pretty fearless.
Oh, yeah.
Her son is even more fearless. You have to
see. That is comfortable, somewhat riding on road. They might not ride on 116, but they would ride on 47 through the center of town, or they would ride on the sidewalk. And then there is this huge cohort in just about any community that you say, come out and ride a bicycle on the road, and they go, forget it. I will not do that. I don't feel safe. I don't feel comfortable doing that. And there is a number of treatments that you can use that help to enhance that sense of safety that increases the number of people for whom you've removed a barrier that kept them from choosing a transportation choice that they really would prefer, but they just didn't really think it was available to them. So wherever we are, there is a large cohort of folks for whom it's much easier just to jump in the car, drive to Millstone or the post office or wherever, and we would really love to make those places, our town, more accessible to more of our citizens for a wider range of transportation choices.
It's an interesting challenge in a car-centric world to
We are
make
very
it
much. And I was really struck, and I said this to Tom a couple of weeks ago, I looked at, just happened to notice a piece of real estate that was for sale on North Main Street. And I was looking at the walkability score for that piece of property. Now, if I had to define walkability anywhere, which is, according to the realtors, you know, how walkable, do you need to own a car to live there? And I would say if I lived on North Main Street, not so much. You know, you can pretty much get between the bus service and the services that are here in town. It scored a 20 out of 100 according to the standard scale of realtors. And I was just struck. If I live in Ashfield, maybe it's a 20, but nothing against Ashfield. I'm on TV here. But I was really struck, and I would love to see the town of Sunderland receiving more favorable scores for walkability, bikeability, and livability. For many towns, as I've been hearing for the last 4 days, it is a case of economic survival in the future and the kind of place they want their grandchildren to grow up in. I would be very proud to have my grandchildren grow up in this town and would love to think it was a place that they were able to walk and bike. And so.
Good.
Can I just add something? The other reason for making this investment in the design is because we've been looking at all of these different projects tonight, the ball field, the playground, and what we want, and there's also a big transportation project at 1.6 or 1.3 million on North Main Street. We want to see this town, and we've got our tricentennial coming up, have a coherent design concept for like that where there's some kind of coherence between the different things that are done.
Absolutely.
And that's why we feel like it's important to make that investment and look at the whole infrastructure, the recreational infrastructure, and kind of get together to have a coherent design that will ultimately, it's a long range thing, but it'll really help with our economic development and the sense of livability here and the sense of like kind of
Identity.
yeah, community and so.
That's a really good point.
I think we're gonna maybe end on that sort of thought. I got one. I like this idea of tricentennial thinking. And I've heard a lot tonight like that, like the steps. Some of us are managing. What kind of ceremony will we have there in tricentennial year downstairs? And what would it look like? And is that what we're building for, to be able to have a super central place? And what about the school property and the playground and the ball field? Can we imagine enjoying together all those places, whether we want to play softball or we want to be walking in the nature path or whatever? But are you the 0-100 person in terms of?
I'm 0 to 100. Our project is 0 to 100,
Yeah,
guys.
well, the whole page is 0 to 100 to some degree.
Not years, like,
Yeah.
it's not gonna last 100 years, but.
That's the idea, and if you look at the extra effort,
Use it.
you had a lot of extra effort in the talking about getting to a lot of people, including people with disabilities. I picked that up today. That's wonderful. We're very inclusive. And I think this longer range thinking really plays right into tricentennial thinking. And it'll be quite a thing to have this kind of stuff, I think. So I like to thank everybody for participating with great ideas. This book has got little prints by everybody on it here. You know? There's a few people that touched it like that. But there's a lot of people that said, why not this, why not this, why not that? And so there's a lot of ideas floating around from different people. So that's kind of what I got out of tonight. I think we can do quite a bit if we do it together and we use our talents. I want to thank the committee for being here in full and in participating over the last few months, so,
What do the people who submitted projects do now? Keep working on them and developing them and improving them? Or do we just wait to hear from you all, or what happens next?
oh, that's a very good question. The clock is starting to run on us. So
Right,
actually, next Wednesday night, we have already posted, that will be the night we'll have to decide what projects are going forward. We don't have to, I think, fully nail them down on what exactly the words are gonna be. But the following day, Margaret is calling for articles for the town meeting. So that means the clock is run to the point that we have to decide which ones will go forward. So we would like to get some more proposal information from you guys on the further stages of your project. But in general, they want to wait till what happens next week in terms of what we'll want to do. And then we're going to be almost done with our efforts. Then it's going to go into a holding pattern almost, I would say, until town meeting.
What
And
is
then the
the
votes.
date of town meeting again?
I
Can
think
you
it's
say?
April 24th, 24th or 27th?
Last Friday of the month.
25th.
If the warrant is voted, when is,
25th.
when is the money released to the asking party?
I think right away. You
So, in
clarify
the
that.
first pay cycle of May, probably.
You can get to the money pretty fast. So those of you that are shovel-ready and are in fact carrying the shovels around in their car,
Your timeline started in March, didn't it?
shovel-ready people. Right.
No, nothing like that. We're good.
So,
It's all good.
so you will hear mostly from us in terms of what we may need from you.
Okay.
So the bulk of your maybe agonizing work is over. But you guys,
It really was.
terrific.
Yeah.
It's gonna be worth it.
Right. It's gonna be work.
So any last minute, going, motion,
Seconded.
okay, we're done.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Oh, thank you,
Gary.
Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
So much.